Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to the final episode of the Takeaway Club podcast, season 1, I should say. So, if you're tuning in for the first time, I'm your host Krishna. A few words before we jump into the episode. This podcast was a side project I picked up just before the quarantine kicked in, and it has really helped me keep sane during these roller coaster times. Over the last few months, I had the privilege of talking to amazing, smart people from different backgrounds, like musicians, CEOs, NGO leaders, virologists, among other wonderful, wonderful people. So, if you want to check out any of the past episodes, you could do so on Spotify or Apple Music or any of the popular music platforms. Simply search for The Takeaway Club and you should find the podcast there. Or a much simpler way would be to head over to the takeaway.club where I have listed all the episodes with relevant links and detailed show notes. It is thetakeaway.club and I also have a fun newsletter going on along with the podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, there is a good chance that you might like that one as well. Coming to today's episode, full disclosure, we recorded this episode a while back and a lot has changed since then. For starters, I hadn't planned on wrapping up the podcast at the time of doing this episode. And another notable mention is we talk at length about the Indian educational system and where there is scope for improvement and all those things. And again, as we were having this discussion, the new educational policy had not been rolled out. So whatever we discuss, we are referring to the old system that was in place. But I felt it was best to preserve the essence of the conversation and haven't edited out anything other than for technical reasons. So that's something I wanted to get out of the way. I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Takeaway Club. And today's episode is a very, very special one because in a lot of ways it exemplifies what this podcast is about. Deep, candid chats with interesting, super inspiring people. And with that coming into today's episode, if you asked me at the turn of the year if I would be speaking with this person, I would have said not a chance. And yet it is one of those conversations that I wanted to have for years. So it's an absolute privilege to have Deepak Mehta in today's episode. A little bit background on Deepak. He did his undergrad in computer science at BITS-Pilani and he went on to do his MBA from IIM Ahmedabad. He currently works as a manager at CRISIL, an Indian analytical company providing ratings, research and other advisory services. How I know Deepak is through Quora. He's one of the most popular and active figures on Quora. He has over 167,000 followers counting. He has written almost 4,000 answers on the platform, hitting the magical 100 million views mark. And he has been awarded the Quora top writer for 5 years straight between 2014 and 2018. His articles have been published in a number of global media houses, including HuffPost, Forbes, Apple News, CNN, Business Insider, The Independent, Yahoo, amongst so many others. Personally, I've been following him on Quora for years now, right from the time I got into the platform when I was in high school. He's one of the smartest persons I have had the fortune of learning from, thanks to Quora and the internet as such. He has had a phenomenal impact on my personality, my ideas, and my ideals, and all of this simply through his Quora answers. So that's something that you should definitely check out. And I'm sure you'll be itching to do that as soon as you hear from Deepak. So without further ado, here is Deepak Mehta. Hi Deepak.
Hey Krishna, hi.
How are you?
Krishna. I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. And I think that introduction was far more flattering than what the truth is. So thank you again for that. And it's an absolute pleasure to be here.
It is basically an account of whatever you have been up to, Deepak. So I would disagree that it was flattering. It's just the kind of person you are. So I didn't have a lot of trouble, stitching that up, to be honest. And that said, I am one of your biggest fans. I've been for years. So for folks listening, if you hear me slur my way through some of the questions or stammer here and there, it is purely because I'm super nervous about doing this episode. So it's one of the cases of where you wouldn't expect that you would be talking to someone that you have looked up to and admired from afar. So that's honestly how I feel about you.
Again, really, really nice, really kind, really generous of you, Krishna. Thank you so much.
So I want to cover a lot of topics today. Of course, you have written 4,000 answers on every topic under the sun. And in a way, the take home for the people listening will be the take home for me as well. But before we get into the episode, I know you've had an incredibly busy and whirlwind of a lockdown, to say the least. So what have you been up to?
Okay, that's interesting. So I think the first couple of months were, it was a very drastic change, right? So I think not only for me, for everyone, to come to terms with the reality that we are living in a world now where even a very small action from a remote location can impact your life. So it was difficult. I think the first lockdown for 3 weeks was really difficult to get through, and I was very naive, right? I was expecting that this would be the end of it, or probably just a few more weeks. So the first 3 weeks, I think it just took me time to come to terms with the new way of things. Then when I realized that okay, there'll be a few more weeks of lockdown, so I started getting into my old hobbies. So I had taken a few months of break from reading books. So I got into that. I started reading a lot of non-fiction books, a genre that I've not really been very fond of. I finally started, thankfully, due to the lockdown, I finally started working again on my physical health, right? So I started working out, I started jogging. And then slowly, I think in the first couple of months, that was my focus. Then the third month, I had a change in terms of the work that I'm doing right now. So starting from, I think, end of May, I started in a new role that was that's a very dynamic one that required me to sort of learn a lot more about some things that I'm not really very good at, and then get into that in just a couple of weeks. And there was no sort of knowledge transfer or handover done from the previous person who left. So it was a very interesting few weeks from, let's say, end of May till end of June. And then at the end of June, I sort of decided to switch cities. I finally left Mumbai on 1st of July after 7 years, and I shifted to Pune. And then I think the last 3 weeks I've been here, and I've just been trying to settle down. So that's pretty much it, brother. I think it's been an interesting time, right? A lot of things have changed, and a lot of these changes are here to stay, right? The work from situation, the entire economic impact that this particular pandemic is going to have, the way businesses are run, the way people think and approach, and both things. So I think it's been an interesting time, and particularly for me, I've changed my role after 3 years. I've changed my city after 7 years, and I finally left Quora, a hobby that I've had for the last 8 to 8.5 years. So I finally decided to hang up my boots there and started sort of writing on Medium. And currently, I'm just trying to get my website, personal blog or a website done for free. My little sister is a computer engineering grad who's pretty amazing at coding, so she's doing it for me for free. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Yes.
Wow, that's awesome. So it's been quite an interesting few weeks for you.
Yes, a lot of change. I actually despise change, right? I like routine, but I think it was overdue. And then when you sort of change one thing, it's easier to change other things. So when my job role changed, I got this new opportunity. I decided, okay, maybe this is the right time to sort of move, because anyways, my new team is based out of Pune, and it'll be a good change, right, from the hectic mayhem that is Mumbai. So, and then when that happened, I sort of figured, okay, in a week's time, I'm going to move to a new city. And Quora really wasn't working out for me for the last few months now, and I think I've laid that out in probably the second last answer of mine on why so, because of the way they're running things now. So I just decided, okay, if I'm changing my job, changing my city, I'd better change my hobby also, right? So I started focusing on. So anyways, I've been on a break for the last 1 month or so. I have not been writing a lot, but was just trying to settle down and get a hang of how Medium works, and then probably get this website up and running. So this probably will be where I'll be doing most of my writing. So without being dependent on a third party platform, having your own website where you have full control of your content and your strategy.
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, that's yeah.
That's something that I hear a lot of people, especially on Twitter, who are into startups and tech space. They have been pushing towards having your own followers, your own email list, move on from these third-party platforms. You never know when they will screw us over.
Absolutely. It's always good to have that, and based on the let's say the current opportunities that you have in terms of all of these blogging platforms. So WordPress Premium is a pretty cheap option, right, compared to what you would shell out a few years ago. So for probably just $100 every year annually, you can have your own personal domain. I mean, if you just want to write for free, they have a free option. If you want to customize it, have your own custom domain, and do that, I think you just shell out $100, which is probably what you pay for a Netflix account on an annual basis. So you have all of these opportunities. You don't have to do a lot of coding. You don't need to know the technical aspects of it, and you can just set this up and then have your own little personal space on the web, right? Instead of depending on a third party.
That makes absolute sense, Deepak. I think, like you mentioned, it's been a little overdue. But I'm glad you started out on Quora. So I know how much I've learned from you there. So a lot of my questions, or not even questions, the things that I want to talk about today, especially the opening few parts, involve your time at Quora. Since that's where we got to know each other in a way. So the thing that I've been most curious about is, as someone who has read, probably I've read hundreds of your answers over these years, and one thing that has stood out for me is the level of detail that goes into your answers. It could be on politics, it could be on movies or comics and whatnot. It doesn't matter what the topic is. But the level of depth you give in an answer is unparalleled. Probably Balaji Vishwanathan comes close in that aspect. There are only a handful of people who puts as much effort into an answer as you folks do. So I want to understand what goes on in your mind when you sit down to draft an answer. Is it a case of coming across an interesting question, and then you do your research to answer that question? Or is it more like pinning down the knowledge that you have already acquired in a way?
Okay. So it's let's say a combination of both. But I lean towards the latter half, right? So I generally avoid writing about topics I do not know anything about. And so a lot of the times I'll come across an interesting question that I have an inkling of of the topic or that particular context, and then I'll, again, as you said, I'll just do my research, figure out what I read about it. So I don't recall stuff exactly, but I sort of retain the key elements that make it feasible later on to just go back and do a Google search and figure out and where that thing came from. So it's mostly the latter, right? So I'll avoid writing about anything that I have zero idea about. So for example, I would not get into cryptocurrency because that is a topic that I've tried reading a lot about. It sort of went over my head, and I still believe that there's not much informed opinion about how and why people should trade in cryptocurrencies, which ones to avoid, which ones to sort of get on the bandwagon. So I'll avoid doing that. So if I see a question that resonates with me in terms of the topics that I think I know about, I'll write about them. It has to be an interesting question. It has to be something that I feel if I write about it, if I spend probably an hour or so writing about it, then that has to give some value to the reader. In rare cases, it does happen that maybe I'm reading a new book, or I'm just reading a new article, and that is something which is very interesting, very, very novel that I haven't read about earlier. So I'll just go back, read a lot more about it, and then I'll try and find questions pertaining to that specifically and then answer them. So it's a combination of both, but it's generally that I'll find an interesting question, I know about something, and then I'll gather my thoughts, do my research, it's easier for me to do so because as you said, right? So I try and retain at least the key components of what I've read. So I might not remember exactly the details and nuances of an article, but I'll carry the gist of it with me. So when probably a year later, if I have to recall that, I'll just put in a few keywords on Google. I am pretty good at that. So I'll do that. I'll just refresh my memory and then sort of write about it.
So actually that brings me back to something that I've been really keen on. How do you retain so much information? Like, do you rely on a specific technique or a routine, maybe something like a mind palace or a mental model that allows you to like learn these vastly different subjects and often in parallel? See, just a quick look at your LinkedIn bio that mentions some of the subjects that you are currently learning. It includes risk management, game theory, bioethics. I mean, I'm just like mentioning a couple of topics. You have like 7-8 subjects there, and they're all like vastly different subjects, right? It's almost like you're absolutely immune to this context switching when it comes to these wide-ranging interests.
So as they say, right, it's not a bug, it's a feature. For me, it's not a feature, it's a bug. So I am unable to focus on something for a very long period of time. So I have to do this. So even during a day, I'll do 3-4 different things, right? So I've found that in the in the recent few years, it's become very difficult for me to sit down and just finish a book and just sit, in a single sitting like I used to do. So now what I do is I break that down into parts. And I try and do a couple of things at the same time. Again, not at the same time per se, but if I'm reading something or I'm involved in a particular activity or doing a particular online course, I'll probably just do that for half an hour or an hour, and then I go back to something else which is completely different, because it actually gives you a break from the monotony of reading about a new topic, right? And I actually find that's useful. So all of these things is just just an outcome of my currently very limited memories, memory span. So I'm unable to sort of focus on something for a very long period of time. So I have to do this, and I've actually found that is useful because I've been able to sort of work on like 3 things in parallel. I'll do that for let's say 10 days, and I'll finish all of those 3 things instead of doing them 3 days at a time. And I've actually realized that even if you're learning about a subject that is not aligned to your interests or your focus areas, there are times, and I'm right now unable to provide a particular instance or an example, but I've found that even two very remote, what do you call, disconnected topics can actually help. So if you're learning about them, you can invite some of the lessons, some of the learnings from one topic and take it to a different topic which is completely unrelated to the first one. And it actually helps you reinforce your learning. So while I was learning about, let's say, so right now I'm learning about scriptures. So I just found a copy of Bhagavad Gita with me from the founder of ISKCON, right? So that's probably like the authority figure on that. So I'm just rereading it. I've read that a few years ago. I'm doing a couple of courses on Coursera, which is so the entire course bundle is called Religion Through Its Scriptures. So it focuses on 6 of the major religions in the world: Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, and Judaism. So there are 6 courses, each one focusing on what the scriptures in that particular course tells you. I'm not a very religious guy. I'm actually not a religious guy at all. And that is something that my parents and my in-laws complain about a lot. But I like reading about it because it's a very interesting part of history, right? So I would rather not have had any religion in the world. But again, because it's already been done. So if you actually go back to the source, read about the history of them and the scriptures and all, you can actually draw a lot of insight into human history, and there are a lot of things to learn. So this course I do sometimes in the morning, right, when I wake up, and then towards the end of night when I find things are more peaceful, right, everybody has slept off, I'm probably just one person awake in this entire 1 kilometer radius, at 3 o'clock at night, I'll just go back to something which is more intensive. So I've been doing a course on Tableau data visualization. So it actually helps me sort of keep up the pace, because I know that, if I do not like what I'm reading right now, I can always stop, go back to something that I find easier to deal with, and then come back when I'm sort of a little relaxed, a little recharged. So again, not a feature, but a bug, but sort of works for me. So yeah, that's good.
So going back to one of my previous points, do you have like a specific technique when you try to learn these subjects?
No, sorry, I didn't address that, but no. So I just read because I like reading, right? It's so reading and cooking are two of my favorite things to do because they are sort of stress busters for me. So I read if I'm on my phone, I read if I'm on my laptop, I read if I just pick a book off my shelf. And Quora actually started all because of that, right? Somebody recommended me that the platform back in 2012 when it was very when it was very much focused on tech, on innovation, on business entrepreneurship, startups, and all. So I started on that, and I actually had a pretty bad accident in 2012. I was bedridden for I think couple of months. So I had nothing more to do. So I finished my Game of Thrones entire 5 books, and I sort of then started on Quora. So I just read a lot. I mean, I don't think I retain more than 10% of what I read in a day. So it could be comics, it could be so I have a pocket feed that I've automated to collect articles from my favorite websites on a regular basis. So I just open that up in the morning. I just go through the top 10, top 15 articles. So I'll just read just because I like reading. I don't read a book or an article with the sole purpose of memorizing that, of remembering information from it. But I've realized that over the last 10 to 12 years of having been quite a voracious reader, I just realized that now and I've gotten into the hang of things, right? So that practice of the last 10, 12 years has allowed me to sort of retain crucial information. So it's not something I do very consciously, but it just happens, and that is, I think, like muscle memory, right? So when people play guitar for a couple of decades, then they don't even have to think about what they're doing. So it's sort of similar to me. Reading is similar for me. So I don't use any specific technique or any specific mental model. I've tried that in college. It didn't really work out, and I again didn't have the patience to persist. So I just focused on reading for the sake of reading, for having fun, and that's how it is right now.
So how does your week look like in general? Maybe particularly the weekends where you have more free time and not bogged down by the office work. Are you like super conscious about where you spend your time? Do you like plan things to the minute? Have this very specific routine that helps you like get the most out of your day?
Absolutely not. I do not have a routine. And again, that is something my father is very, what do you call, very angry about, right? Always, because it's an army person. He has this thing about, having a fixed routine, being on time, doing things on schedule, and doesn't really work out for me. So what I do is I do not plan out. I don't have a planner. I don't have a diary or an online planner or a productivity app or something like that. I just go to sleep when I feel like sleeping. I get up when when I'm fully rested, at least on the weekends when I don't have to sort of, do any work. And then in the day, I think I'll get some of the basic household chores out of my way in the morning itself, in the first couple of hours after waking up. And then after that, it just depends. So for example, today, I knew I had this session lined up. So I just freed my time and tried to sort of wrap everything up by 5 o'clock. Didn't really happen. Sorry for that. But yeah, and if let's say next weekend, I'm planning on not doing anything. So I'll probably just sit down, watch a couple of movies that that are there in my watch list. I'm reading through a few of the newer DC comics. I haven't read comics in, I think, last couple of years now. So I'm just reading through that. So I just plan on spending the day in a very relaxed, Goan style, right? Not doing anything. So I don't really have a plan for the weekend. Some days I'll feel like doing a lot of things. I'm super productive. From the minute I get up to, let's say, till I fall asleep, I'll be on calls, doing my household chores at the same time, being on mute and all. I'll try and juggle things and, try and multitask just to save time. But on some days, I absolutely feel like doing nothing. So you have that Bruno Mars song, right? So I just feel like that, and I don't do anything. I don't plan out my day, to be very honest. I think a lot more effort goes into planning out things to the T, right, to the minute. And you actually end up not executing that. So it's better to have an idea of what you want to accomplish in a particular day, and it can actually be not doing anything, right? Just relaxing, recharging. I think at least in the current day and age where everyone is hustling 24/7, and people really do not seem to have time to sort of just stop and just look around, figure out what they're doing, and take a break. I think that's pretty important to sort of give yourself time every now and then and not get lost in just things that you have to do. So you have to do your job well, you have to excel at what you're doing, you have to have a personal brand, you have to be active on social media. There's a lot of pressure. Right? The world has gotten. Yeah, and I think it's so. What I do is at least in every day I have this rule which I call the 4% rule. So 4% of a day is approximately an hour. So I try and take out an hour every day, irrespective of how hectic that day has been. And I use that hour just for myself. So I usually do that, once my wife goes to sleep. So I'll just have that hour where I'll do absolutely nothing, or I'll just do things that I want to do, and not things I have to do. So that actually gives me a good break, sort of helps me rejuvenate after a full day of working. And then I extend that concept over to some of the weekends. So last weekend was pretty hectic for me. I was sort of just setting up the place, so I decided to wrap all of that up. But this weekend, I know I don't have a lot of things to do, so I'm just talking to you now, and I'll be hosting a friend for dinner at, let's say, 9 o'clock. That's pretty much it. So yeah.
So it's not about productivity hacks or like hustling, but rather like you have like a core set of activities that you really enjoy doing. So when you end up doing that, you would have had a productive day. So sort of like a domino effect. That makes so much sense. So there is no inherent pressure to get something done.
Absolutely. So if you do things that you like, I mean, it's no longer a job or a chore, right? So at times when I felt that writing on Quora for me was more like a job that I had to do, I would just stop for a couple of days and I'd only write when I felt like. So yeah, most of the things that I do over the weekends. So even learning, right? So I don't really do courses just because I have to amp up my professional resume. And again, you see, right? So a lot of them are not even related to the field that I'm in right now. I just do them because I like learning. And if I don't like something, even though I might have invested, let's say, 10 hours into that already, I'll just stop instead of wasting another 10 more hours trying to just finish because you've already started, you already invested time. I would rather just save those 10 future hours. So I just do things that I am interested in. And I mean, having a schedule probably doesn't work for me. I know it works for a lot of super amazing, super productive people, but for me it doesn't, and I'm really happy that way.
So actually, one common thing that I see with IIM folks, right? And not to brand you people or anything. My mentor is from IIM and a couple of my close friends, a lot of people in my circle. So when they look back and they inevitably point out their time at IIM as this very transformative moment that made them more curious or eager to learn new subjects simply because of the kind of environment that they spend those 2 years, right? Is that something that you resonate with?
Actually, my assessment of those 2 years is very different, right? So you don't really have time to do a lot of things. There's a lot of academic workload that you have to take care of. And then academics is not even the core of it, right? So I think once you get into a college like that, where life is really intense and so you have all of these subjects that you have to learn about, right? And then in just the first 3 months, you need to have your resume set up. And it's not that easy. So I think it took me 3.5 months just to get my resume to that 1-pager format. And it took me probably like 24 revisions. So as soon as you come in, you're assigned a placement committee representative to you who will work with you throughout the placement process, starting from helping you put your resume across in the best format possible. I thought I had everything in place in the first couple of meetings, but then I realized that was not the case. So then you have that, and then companies start coming in, they'll have their pre-placement talks where you have to go and you have to sort of ask intelligent questions to stand out from everybody else. You have to make an impact. And after that, so classes only were from 8:45 in the morning till 1:15 in the afternoon. So it was barely, I think, 5.5 hours. Not even 5.5 hours, I think 4.5 hours, right? But then after the classes, you have to sort of prepare for the next day. So you'll have 3 more classes the next day. You know what is going to be taught. You have to go prepared with your cases. You have to prepare a presentation on your on your understanding of that particular case. You have to, in some cases, you have to actually solve the questions before and then go present your methodology or the sort of thought process that you had, and you do that in groups. So classes actually were the easiest part because you would actually just sit down and listen to the professor. but and then you go back at 1:10, have your lunch, and then you wait for the next few minutes if there's a surprise test announcement. If not, you go back and relax for a couple of hours, and then you start studying probably at the library, right? Because it's a group of 4 to 5 people. So you don't really get a lot of time, and it was a very difficult period for me because I came from a diametrically opposite kind of an environment in BITS Goa where there was 0% attendance. And I probably abused that feature in at least my last 2 years. So I probably barely had 5% attendance in my last few years. Again, not recommended. I think people should go to class even if there's not, even if you don't find it really interesting, because something or the other will stick. And in college, I think kids feel that they have a lot to do and they don't really have time. But trust me, looking back, right, going back to the 2007, 2011 years, I think I had a lot of time. I could have done everything that I wanted and attended my classes. And if I had the chance to do it again, I'll do it. But again, just coming back, so yeah, the setup in IIM was very different. There was a lot of focus on academics. You had 90% attendance rule. So even if you skipped one class for a particular subject, that was the maximum that you were allowed. Second class, if you skip, you go below the 90% mark because they only had 15, 20 classes in a particular subject. So, and then you had to be on time. So I got thrown out of a class because I entered the class at 8:46 instead of 8:45 a.m. Right. So I didn't really get a lot of time, and I don't think people really get a lot of time when they are in a super competitive Indian education, the pinnacle of Indian education system where everything is focused in terms of achievements, right? You have to go out, you have to be in the top 10 or top 15% of the batch. You have to get the highest paying internship. You have to get the biggest brand name. You have to be part of some of the most popular clubs. You have to be a part of, let's say, the PlaceCom committee because that gives you very a strong boost to your resume. So a lot of things to be done, and it's super competitive. That people are there with that mindset to sort of continuously hustle and work for the next 2 years. It was very difficult for me, and I do not think that IIM was that transformative for me. It did absolutely teach me that it's possible for me to stretch my limits, right? So even if I have to work 16 hours a day now, it doesn't really bother me because I was accustomed to sort of working 22 hours a day, on days that are really crazy during those couple of years. But I believe that my transformation, the most transformational time of my life was when I was in my undergrad at Goa. I know it sounds very counterintuitive, but I had a lot of time to figure out who I was as a person, where my interests lie, and what I wanted to do. And I actually had this conversation with someone who was from BITS-Pilani. We didn't know each other. He was from the Pilani campus. I was from Goa, but again, we were in the same batch in the same class in IIM. And once we're just sitting around and we're just discussing this, and we both realized that in IIM you get set, you're given a set of things to do. You're given a clear path on what you have to do to achieve that. You're given enablers to help you reach your objective. In BITS, you're given absolute freedom to do everything that you want to do. So I know classmates of mine who have gone on to civil services. I know classmates of mine who have gone on to advanced research in physics. Classmates of mine who are doing voluntary work with World Bank and with UNESCO and all. And people who have gotten into politics, people who have gotten into stand-up comedy, into freelancing photography. And there are people who are super successful in all of their fields. And a lot of these people, when I look back to the time I spent with them, or the time where I knew them, right? I didn't really spend a lot of time with a lot of folks. I had a very small, close group. So it just feels like that was all because of the freedom that the entire BITS system provided, right? So it told people that you can be good at something. You can be good at a lot of things, and you don't really have to be excellent at academics to achieve that. And it's perfectly fine to pursue a very offbeat career if you're passionate about it. So I think BITS for me was a time when I got a lot of freedom to try out things, to figure out what I wanted to do, make a lot of mistakes, and not get bogged down by it. Thankfully, right? And I think it was probably the most wonderful time. And my sort of love for reading rejuvenated during that time, where I would go to the library not to read about the academics, but to probably read something about political science or philosophy or probably just fiction, right? So it allowed me that freedom and that time to do and explore all of these avenues, figure out what I wanted to do. And I think that was it. In IIM, it taught me a lot of important life lessons. And it actually, in terms of my professional achievements, I'm here because of my time, my couple of years there, couple of years at Ahmedabad. But I'll say in terms of personal overall transformation, I'll say that BITS was far more important to me than Ahmedabad was.
That makes total sense. So back in your final year in BITS, what was the thought process like when you decided to get into MBA? Was it just like the next logical step, being in final year of undergrad, or is that something that you were always set your eyes on because you were passionate about management? So what was it about MBA that fascinated you in a way, maybe?
Okay, so one thing that I've tried to do, Krish, is that I've been brutally honest about most of the things, right? So I'll again do that. I didn't do MBA because I was passionate about it. I didn't do it because I wanted to get into management. I wanted to be in finance or strategy or consulting, marketing, blah blah blah. I didn't really even know a lot about what these institutes offer in terms of specializations. At the time, I decided to write my CAT. For me, it just boiled down to one simple thing, that was the only way out for me. So I told you, right, I had a pretty mediocre academic track record at BITS, and a lot of that has to do because of my own choices. So when I was about to graduate, I realized that based on my achievements in the last 3 years academically and otherwise, I wouldn't really get probably a good, comfortable paying, a good, engaging kind of a job. And I decided that rather than that, I'll probably just try something else. And MBA was just becoming a fad at that time. And I thought, okay, hey, I can do that. And thankfully for me, it sort of clicked, right? So I got into a good college. I figured out a good, specialization for myself. And I'm at a job where I'm actually very happy. Otherwise, I wouldn't have stayed with the company for the last 7 years now. So it worked out for me, but it wasn't a very logical or a very well thought out choice for me. It was just an escape from getting into probably not having a job, or probably having a job that pays probably 20,000 a month at we used to call them bus companies, right? Because they would just hire people in buses, right? They'll hire buses. So rather than have that, I decided that this is probably one more chance of redeeming my academic mistakes, and probably getting another chance at redoing things, and I took that up. So it's not a very biased decision, but I know that people have already asked me a lot of this question a lot of times. I've told them that this was my thought process, but it should not be yours. If you have that option, if you have that clarity,
it sounds counterintuitive on the face of it, but when you look at it, it's sort of like a motivation for people who still haven't figured out what they want to do. And then when they hear from someone like you're already at BITS, which is like a very prestigious college in India, but even at that point you hadn't figured out, you were sort of boxed in and in a way forced to take the MBA leap. But in hindsight, it has worked out really well. This is like a very good encouragement for folks who are still pondering whether MBA is the right step for me or not. I mean, at least that's how
Absolutely. Yeah, I just tell people a couple of things. I tell people to sort of focus on their academics, right? So a lot of people will tell you GPA doesn't matter, your academic record doesn't matter. It does. At least in the first year, it absolutely does. So focus on academics. Go to classes, even if you don't really want to. You have time. You have all the time in the world. At least during undergrad days, do a lot of things. Explore. Absolutely do that, right? Even if you're bad at it, nobody is going to remember. I did not try out a lot of things because, again, as I told you earlier, right, I'm not a very socially extroverted, outgoing kind of a person. And I always used to think about what other people would think about me if I'm doing something and I sort of falter at it, if I'm not good at it. But I think that's not the right way to look about it. So I took a couple of years, and even after that, so if you goof up, right, you make a fool of yourself, people will forget about it in a couple of days, if not a month, if not a year, right? Nobody really remembers all the fucked up things that you do. And so that's my third advice. And the fourth one would be, if you have clarity, do what you want, because you can actually be good at everything, not just the mainstream career choices, right? So during my time, I knew for sure that I didn't want to do a master's, right, in terms of MS or a advanced degree of that sort. MBA again was a logical choice because of the process of elimination. But I know that I knew people with me who were very clear that they wanted to do a master's in a particular specialization and then go on to do a PhD, and they've actually done that. So if you are serious about it, there's a lot of time. You can actually start working on figuring out what you want to do after college as soon as you enter it. As soon as you enter your undergrad and you get a hang of how things are in the first semester, probably from the second semester you can start planning out your future career trajectory and start working on it. And then there's a lot of options now, Krish. I think at my time, I didn't really know a lot of people who had done their MBA or their masters. There was not a lot on the web. There were these very initial nascent forums where you could figure out and talk to people. But now I think in 10 years, things have changed a lot. And you can actually go out and talk to people. There are websites that you can connect to people who have already done what you want to do, and then take their opinion, their feedback. And you actually have a lot of information at your disposal to make a very informed choice. And I think people should do that. People should be serious about their career. I got lucky, probably, right? I just stumbled my way into things that I actually wanted to do. But it doesn't have to be that way for everyone. And I think people should actually make an informed choice. And you have everything at your disposal right now to do that.
That's true. Actually, a side note here, maybe at the time when you were thinking about CAT, Pagal Guy, or a couple of platforms like that.
Total Gada and Pagal Guy, yes.
But now I can actually ask someone like who sort of tried dipping my feet into the same, like every undergrad kid who ever went to college. So I can safely say that your profile on Quora itself is like a mini platform of sorts, giving a nice consolidation of all the relevant advice. So I just want to sort of plug that in here. Actually, I want to get back to a more elaborate discussion on your IIM journey. I know we talked about it a lot, but I still have a couple of things. I really don't want to miss out the opportunity of this conversation in a way. But before that, I want to talk about your childhood, and in particular, your relationship with your father, if that's okay with you. Because I vividly remember reading one of your answers about you growing up. You're like 5 years old when your father decided to move out of the village and take you to the city to ensure that you had the best of futures, which was a really huge gamble at that point, if I'm not mistaken. So what were some of the instances from your childhood or some of the decisions that your father made, which eventually set you up for success or shaped up the person that you grew up to be?
So, I think you've got it right, Krish. I am where I am right now because of a lot of folks, especially my parents, and again, especially my father in the formative years. And then I think I've had a very interesting last 12 years. I've been with the same person. My girlfriend, now my wife, was actually changed me in a lot of ways, some not to my liking, but again, good for me, right, in the end. So I think by going back to my childhood, I think the best decision that my father took, which changed the course of my life, was to sort of take us with him because I was about to start my first standard, and he knew very well that if he stayed back in the village, it wouldn't give me the quality of education that he wanted. And he was at that time in training, and he was not allowed to have a family with him. So he sort of smuggled us, in a sense, to Pune at that time. Again, I think I started off in Pune, and now I'm in Pune, so that's wonderful. So he smuggled us in. He sort of set us up in a civil society. So he was not allowed to have a family, so he wouldn't get the army accommodation.
He was in the army, if I'm not mistaken, or
absolutely in the army, yes. So while in the army, you have your accommodation for your family, but that's not extended to people who are under training. So he took us in, and he knew it was going to be expensive. And I think at that time his salary would be mere 3,000 to 4,000 rupees, and he was already shelling out 700, 800 for the for a small 1 BHK house in Pune with 5-year-old and a 1-year-old toddler. And he took that risk. He knew it was going to be difficult, but I think his long-term aim was to set me and my sister up for quality education, give us the opportunity which he never had. Again, I will not say that, right, because his story is similar to mine, except for the fact that I was already, I had a far better platform to start with. So my grandfather, he moved down from the hills. So we are from a remote village in Kumaon in Uttarakhand, and that's a very hilly area, right? You'll barely find one family in a 1 square kilometer radius, and they're not good schools. And my father used to sort of actually walk to school, which was 15-16 kilometers away, and then come back. And again, the quality of education wasn't really great, right? It's a very remote location. So I think after a few years of my father studying there for, I think, till his 6th, 7th standard, my grandfather decided to take his family and move down to the plains where there were more people, more opportunities, more facilities. And he took up trade of building houses, of carpentry and all to provide for his family. And my father, they had a far more difficult time, 20 years before mine, but they persevered. So my grandfather made a lot of sacrifices to ensure that he could provide the best, even though that was constrained by his abilities and his circumstances, he wanted to provide the best he could for his children. He sort of, my father basically completed his graduation and then enrolled in the army, which was a step up from where we were, right? Farmers with no land, and a person who is, just who sort of spent his entire youth working and physically pushing the boundaries of his body just to provide for his family. And then my father sort of decided to continue that same trend of, sacrificing and doing it, and doing the best for your family when he took us to Pune. So I will say that actually, had my father not made all of those choices and all of those difficult choices and those sacrifices, I wouldn't have been here. I've been given a lot of opportunities, a lot of platform that he didn't have. And I actually owe everything to him and my mother for all that they've done. And I've, I think, written about it. I don't really like talking about my personal experiences a lot, but I've written about it because I feel that thing actually had a good takeaway, right? No pun intended, but very good takeaway for a lot of people. So while we were, so just after a year in Pune, when my dad's sort of training ended, we shifted to Visakhapatnam, a very amazing place. And again, over there, I knew that he was at that time diagnosed with TB, tuberculosis, which was a pretty deadly disease back then. And he could not afford losing his job, so he would continue his training and his job, and then he would come back home and he would go for his treatment. And he had a wonderful doctor who saved his life, who didn't charge anything from him, right? So he was a doctor called Demudu Babu from Visakhapatnam, who used to treat patients for free to the extent possible. He would only charge if the patients were able to pay. And he was probably, and people talk a lot about, angel figures, right? And he literally was an angel figure to my dad. So my dad did all of that. He struggled and fought with TB for close to a year, but he never let that get into the way of my sister's education or my family's well-being. And I think over the years, and I knew that it was difficult for him to sort of even manage the fees for my college, even after 12 years, right? So he had a lot of responsibilities to his parents, to his family. So we're not from a well-to-do family, not at all. But I think things have improved quite a bit in the last few years, thankfully. So he had a lot of obligations. He had very young siblings who were probably 10, 12 years younger to him. So he had to take care of them also. And at the same time, he had this new family, right? His wife and 2 kids who he had to look after. So he did the best he could with his limited resources. And so even when I was in college, I knew that I never sort of, I never sort of clamored after expensive things. And I was very conscious about my spending because I knew it was difficult for him to provide. And even managing fees, which was at that time pretty low. I think it was, including hostel and everything, it was close to 75K a year. And including other expenses, probably 1 lakh. And I did my best to get as much scholarship as I could. But I knew that still it was a big financial burden on him. So I was very conscious about it. And I'm still, although I'm earning pretty good right now, I'm still very conscious about spending. That was, I think, one more thing during my last couple of years of undergrad. So I was told by a lot of people that probably going for a GMAT is a better choice in terms of the exposure that you get, and in returns you'll get absolute returns after the end of it. But I knew it was a very expensive proposition, and again at that time you didn't really have a lot of options online to figure out to make a very sound decision. I didn't know that I could easily get a loan without collateral and something, and that is the reason I sort of went for CAD, which was at that time a far more economical choice than going for a GMAT and then going for a Ivy League college or a good international college in Europe and US where they'll charge you probably an arm and a leg for 2 years of education, and I knew that he could not afford it. So I'll say that a lot of my life till now, the 30 years of my life, a lot of that has been influenced by my father and my mother, who was always besides him, right? Making the same sacrifices as him, making the same hard choices for the for the children. So I think I owe a lot. I think probably everything to them. So yeah,
it's amazing.
Sort of a sentiment for me. But again, I think thank you for asking.
Can you actually recall the day you got into IIM? What was their reaction like when you broke the news? It was sort of like a very happy ending after a lot of sacrifice and everything. Maybe if you can recall.
So when you got into, are you talking about the CAT results or the final admission letter?
I think, when the CAT results came out, that was sort of like you knew you were set, right? Maybe unless there were two different reactions or circumstances, in which case I probably want you to bring up both.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, so I do remember the result day very vividly, and weirdly enough, I do not have any recollection of the day I got my Ahmedabad offer letter, right? Which is very weird because that was that was a college I always wanted to get into. After the fact that I decided to go for MBA, but I do really remember the day when the CAT results came out. So they were supposed to come out on January 10th or 11th, somewhere around that, in 2010. Sorry, 2011, my bad. Yeah, 2011, they were supposed to come out during the, let's say, around 10th of January. But they sort of got leaked a week before that. Right? So, yeah. So, again, interesting story. At that time, my girlfriend and I were in Matgaon. So, I just come back after my winter vacations, and we just come back a couple of days early to Goa to just spend some time and relax. So we were staying in a hotel in Matgaon, and then I was just relaxing. I was not expecting the results to be out, so I was just relaxing. And a friend of mine who had also appeared for CAT along with me, she just called me up in the morning, wee hours of the morning, right, 7 or 8 o'clock. And she told me to check the results, and I told her, yeah, the results not out, not due for a week or so now. She told me that they've already been leaked. Just go and check it out. And I just, I was sleepy. Like it was, I think, 8 in the morning. And I was very sleepy, and all of that vanished. And I just asked her, okay, what to do, how to do it. And she gave me all of those details. I think she messaged all of those details over to me on Google Talk. I don't think if you remember that, right? It was the chat application that people used to back in 2010 and all, right? When there were no So I did that. So I just woke my girlfriend up and I told her that this is the case. And I just went out in my shorts looking for a internet cafe because there were no smartphones. Right? So I just went for an internet cafe. I scoured around Matgaon for an hour. Nothing was open. It was 8 in the morning. It's too early for Goa. Nothing was open. So I just came back. I just called my friend up and I told her, these are my credentials. Just feel free to log in and tell me. And I just asked her, by the way, how much did you get? So she told me I got a 99.99.
Oh, wow.
So I didn't know how to react at that time. And she said, I don't believe it. I know it's very weird.
Now, knowing your story, I sort of know how to react to that, but go ahead.
Yes. So I was, and she was one of the smartest people in the batch. So I was not surprised. But I think, again, getting this close, getting probably a perfect score, I was like amazing. And then I became a little anxious, right? So there's someone who's good at academics, who's been a 9-pointer all her life, and she's again aced this exam and probably flunked at it. So I gave her credential. I then waited for a few minutes. I think everybody by that time till 10 o'clock in the morning, everybody had gotten wind of what the results. So that the results have been leaked, and everybody was trying to log in. So that was it was taking a long time to sort of get to the website, right? Get through. After half an hour, she called me up and she told me, "You've gotten 100." And I'm like, "Okay, what is that?" So then you got 100 percentile. And I told her, "Okay, please don't kid with me. This is not a good thing to do, right? I mean, this is be serious." And she told me, "No, I can send you that screenshot over email, but you have gotten 100." And then both of us just remained in silence for the next couple of minutes, and we decided later on that the logical explanation for this is that the results are just dummy results, fake results. Sort of very eerily, what do you call, coincidental.
To be true in a way.
Yeah, to be true, absolutely, right? And we were like, yeah, mock test mein to we had a 99.5 score. Suddenly in the final, I have a 99.99, you have 100, which is, I don't think it's possible. It's very remote. The chances are very low. And we said, okay, let's just wait for the final results to come out. And then I think the next day, my wife left, my girlfriend, sorry, at that time, she left Goa. I went to my college. I had a good connection over there. So until then, somehow news had leaked about her result and mine to a lot of people in the batch. And so a lot of my friends in my hostel came to my room and, we sort of started logging in to see the results for ourselves. We did that and it was a very interesting kind of a feeling, but I think it was more anxiety than relief because I had no idea that the results were true.
Okay.
So it was a very anxious week of waiting, but at the final day, after 40-45 minutes, when I finally got through to the portal and saw my result, the final result, that was, I think, a very insane feeling. So we went out that same night. So I checked my results 6 o'clock in the evening, I believe. We went out, all of us went out for a good celebration the same day. And I told my father, and he was like, "Okay, good job." And I was a little surprised, right? I expected him to be a little more happy. Then I checked again with him the next day. I told him that I got a perfect 100 score in CAT and you're not happy. He's like, "But the exam is of 180 marks, right?" So I told him, no, I haven't gotten 100 out of 180. It's the percentile score that I've gotten, which probably says that I scored, let's say I was the top 10 scorers or top 8 scorers in the exam. And then it dawned on him. Then he realized that. So he was thinking that I had 100 marks out of 180, which was still good, right? But so that was a very interesting week, interesting few days of my life. But I frankly do not remember when I got the actual offer letter from Ahmedabad. I do not really recall what really transpired, but I was sort of expecting it. But again, there was a lot of anxiety on, even after this, if I don't get into a good college, what does that say about me? But thankfully, I did get a couple of options, Calcutta and Ahmedabad, and I was really happy about it.
Actually, I vaguely remember reading something on the lines where you were spending this on a party or you were at a bar or something right around the time results came and your dad gave you the money to spend for party maybe, or I may be way off here, but I remember you sort of had this a moment of realization about money or something. Just forgive me if I'm gotten it totally wrong here.
Yeah, that's the right recollection, Krish. So so again, my birthday is on Jan 4th. So when you decided to go out for the treat, it was a dual celebration, right? My birthday and the results. So I knew, it was a group of 20 odd people that I had to sort of take out to celebrate with some of my closest friends. So I told my dad that I think this is the plan and I would need some money. And that was, I think, probably the first time in the 4 years I asked him for money. I had some from my savings already, but I told him, thoda sa hoga, right? I'll probably need 10, 15K, 20K to do this. He paused for a moment and he said, "Okay, absolutely. Yeah, go ahead. You have all the reason to celebrate." And this was before he realized that I had a 100 percentile score and not a 100 out of 180 score.
Okay.
Right? And I didn't think about it. I was very exhilarated. So I just thanked him. I went to the ATM, withdrew the money. We went out and partied. And that moment came back to me few years later, right? So it was 2013, 2014. I had already been working for a year. I was paying off my student loans. And actually, me and my friends had sort of planned to go out on a vacation, right? And I knew it was a decently expensive proposition, right? Probably $1 lakh per head. And I was just saving for it. I had all of things planned. And then dad told me, next year your sister's fees is also coming up, so just make sure that you can save for it. I said, okay. I didn't say no to him. I said, okay. And then after the call, I sat down, and I thought, I've been studying my entire life, right? And now I'm working, I'm earning well. And even now I'm not able to sort of spend on myself, do things that I like. I have all of this responsibility. So I had that thought for a few moments. Then I just went to a nearby resto bar and all, and I ordered something to eat and a few drinks. And then while in that bar, I had this recollection of this memory from a few years ago. And I then realized that, okay, my father, when he paused for that moment, he was probably just figuring out if he can actually spare that money. And if he can't, what will he do? And I just thought to myself, okay, how selfish can a person be, right? I mean, I'm earning probably 20 times more than him, right? When we've 20 times more than what he used to when I asked him for a sum like that. And now he's just telling me to sort of take care of my younger sister, who's 5 years younger to me. And I am thinking of that as a burden while he's sort of spent 20, 25 years of his life caring after me, making sure all of my requirements, all of my needs and necessities are met and taken care of. And, he is left no stone unturned and trying to provide us with every amenity, every comfort, every possibility. And I am here thinking about taking a fucking vacation and, letting that get into the way of my responsibilities, because I think that at that moment I realized that I am now in the same situation that my father was in a few years ago, because I know that I cannot afford a 4 lakh per annum fees for my sister's education. She went to Manipal, it's a pretty expensive college, right? So I knew he could not do that. And then it dawned upon me, right, that I was being incredibly selfish and an absolute tool. And that is the day I decided to take a stock of things, right? Rethink the way I was doing things, or the way my entire thought process and approach towards life. And I'm actually grateful for that moment, that shady bar that I was in, because it gave me the clarity on where my priorities had to be. So I think it was a realization a few years late, right? Probably so it was 2010 to 2014, probably 3.5 years. But it was a good moment because that actually gave me a lot of clarity on who I should be as a person, who I should be aspired to be as a person, rather than who I was at that point in time.
It's amazing. Thanks for sharing that, Deepak. I think there is a lot to be learned from that story.
Good to know.
Maybe slightly like going back to your IIM days, and probably this is a very selfish question on my part, but I still feel for folks listening, at least who are trying to get into IIM, I know a lot of people like that. They might be very interested in something like this. So what was your IIM interview like? The one at Ahmedabad, the one that you eventually got through?
Okay. So most of the interviews were, I think almost all of the interviews, I interviewed for 6 IIMs, for FMS, for XLRI, and almost all of them were very different than the others. So I think just to sort of recollect, my IIM Bangalore interview got over in 5 minutes. And the first question that I was asked was about my low GPA, which was probably just north of 7 out of 10. And my really poor grades in my core courses in the third year. And I had sort of decided that if anything, I'll be honest, right? I think that was something that that's a sort of a life lesson, or a sort of a policy that I follow. And that is again something that I've learned from my father. So I decided I'll be brutally honest, and I'm not going to spin a story saying that I had this trouble and all of that. I'll just tell them very frankly that I was an idiot. I didn't really take my studies seriously, and that was a mistake that I made. And I'm more than willing to sort of remedy that. So I did that. I told him, I said, right, and this was the circumstances. After probably the first year, and it was all true. After probably the first year of sort of going to all of the classes and trying to learn everything and excel at it, I just realized that computer science is not cut out for me, right? And then I fell into the trap of thinking or finding excuses. Okay, GPA doesn't matter and all of this bullshit, right? And I started skipping classes, and then actually that eventually led to my mediocre academic record. And I told the interviewer very frankly that this was the case.
Mm-hmm.
So he told me, okay, at Bangalore, we look for very academically intense, academically focused candidates. So why should we offer you a seat? So I told him, okay, you're absolutely right. But then, I mean, if you just look at my college record that's in isolation, then you have your answer, right? I mean, I'm probably not the best fit for your college. But if you look at my academic record before college, or even my results in CAT, because, that was the moment when I realized that I'd made a mistake in the last few years and to remedy that. And I did my best. So if you look at those things, so you have an idea that I have A, the capability to excel at academics, and B, the realization that I actually made a huge mistake during my undergrad years, and I'm willing to actually work on it, and I have proof, right? So I told him that I spent almost 8 to 9 months focusing on my CAT preparation alongside my classes and my internship in the second half of the year, and I actually did pretty good at it. He was not convinced. He said, no, we cannot waste a seat on someone like you who was already shown lapsed once, right? And we would rather afford it to someone who has a consistent track record. And at that point, I was so frustrated that I told him, okay, if that is the case, then you should probably just lay it out in the evaluation criteria that you do not want someone with a 7 GPA or probably a 9, below 9, sub 9 GPA. And I think that was the point when I offended the interviewer, who was probably just a few years elder to me, probably just, I think, 28, 30. So my age right now. He probably got offended and he said, okay, we're done with the interview. Thank you. And instead of fighting with him, I just said, thank you so much for your time. It was not wonderful meeting you, something of that sort, something very sassy and something very stupid. And then I sort of left the interview. So that was one. The Calcutta interview, I was very sure after the interview that I was not going to get in because it was, again, about my academics. It was, I think, a rapid fire 30-35 minute discussion on questions related to academics, to the various subjects, and I did try my best to answer them. I had actually prepared for them after the results came out, and I had a couple of months to prepare for the interview. But I think after having walked out, after walking out of that 40-minute rapid fire session with the interviewer, where they probably asked me 25-30 questions, I was sure that I hadn't done a great job. I was not expecting, the final result to be a yes, but thankfully it was. So it was again a purely academically focused thing, but probably they just wanted to test if I had prepared for it and if I was willing to sit down through a 30-minute grilling interview schedule. That was something, that interview stood out. The Ahmedabad interview was a very comfortable one. It was my first interview actually, and as soon as I entered the room, I saw these two people who were probably in their 50s, very senior, very knowledgeable from just the look of it, right? The professors. And I actually really got scared at the moment. I stumbled in, and instead of sitting down on my chair, I almost fell. I shook their hand and I said good morning when it was already 2 o'clock in the afternoon. But I think after that moment, they realized I was nervous. They told me not to be nervous. They told me that everybody here is someone like you, right? A 20, 21, 22-year-old year-old person. And don't get intimidated by us. And they actually made me feel very comfortable in the first 5 minutes. Then they did ask me about my academics. I gave them the same explanation, and then from the look of it, I think they liked that reply. They liked the honesty in the reply. And then they asked me a lot about my passion, my hobbies, what I wanted to do in MBA. I had some idea till that at that point. So it was a very mixed bag of questions, a very healthy mix of questions from various aspects, from current affairs, from my hobbies and interests, non-academic, to actually academics and possibly my future plans and all. And again, it was a half an hour discussion. And after walking out of that, I was very confident that okay, these interviews probably won't be as bad or as difficult as I was thinking they would be.
Okay.
And that actually gave me a boost of confidence in my later set of interviews for the day and then for the week.
And then the Bangalore interview happened. Yeah, actually, I find this a very contrasting interview experiences, right? Do you think it's down to the college principals as such, or simply down to the interviewers who are their moods and what their thought processes? It seems like there is way too much at stake for something that is not really as systematic as at least I would expect, if that makes sense.
I think you're right? An interview is always going to be a very subjective assessment, right? It depends on the panel that you get. It depends on the interviewer, and so you might have a great interviewer, but if your personalities do not vibe, so you might not have a very healthy or a very nice interaction with them. And some of them all should not, but they do carry their own quirks and idiosyncrasies into the interview. They carry their own personal baggage, which is not a good thing to have, right? And then this you're right. There's some impact of the overall college philosophy, right? So I think a lot of people know this, but I think Bangalore is the one that gives the most importance to your academics, right? It doesn't really care a lot about your CAT score. It cares about what how much you scored in your 10th, in your 12th, in your undergrad, all the things that you do. So if you're a very dynamic undergrad profile with a 8.59 plus GPA, and you're part of a lot of clubs and you took a lot of initiatives, and even if you sort of score a 95 percentile in your CAT, you still have a shot at a Bangalore. On the other hand, I think Calcutta has a very intense focus on your CAT score, apart from just a record. So I know a person, I know a colleague, a batchmate of mine, who had a 5.5 plus GPA in college, and he had an excellent CAT score. So he got through to IIM Calcutta. Wow. And again, I think it boils down to the nuances of the various colleges, their overall philosophy, and I do not think it's a good way to go, because you are leaving a lot of things to subjective assessments and to people's own peculiarities. So depending on so if I had a pretty let's say if I didn't have the interviewers I had during the Ahmedabad interview, I don't know what would have happened, right? I wouldn't have gotten through properly if they were not so understanding. And probably it wouldn't have given me that boost of confidence for the later interviews also. And judging someone's overall potential, or deciding their professional or their educational fate just based on a single 60 to 100 question paper or on a single 20-30 minute interaction, I think it's not the good thing. It's not the right way to do things. And we need to have some amount of we need to have a system where everything is considered, where people get multiple opportunities, right? Where people can actually go back and undo sort of, right, the past mistakes. People are not bogged down because they got a 70+% score in 10, right? And that could be due to multitude of factors, right? You probably were in a bad phase of your life. You lost someone. You probably just fell sick on the day of the actual exam, right? So we should not actually penalize students for doing that. And at the same time, we should not just get rid of that entire thing. We need to have a very objective mechanism which gives weightage to different things, right? So you could have a system that gives a 10% weightage to your 10th and 12th score, and it has to be a very logical scale which cannot be gamed. And then there's something about the undergrad scores, your CAT written scores, your interviews, your personality assessment, your overall aptitude, right? And I think we need to get rid of the subjectivity as much as possible. So I'm very glad that they sort of got rid of the entire group discussion part of the selection process, because that never helped anyone, right? So having a group of 10 people come in, all of them competing for the same thing, and then you just need to have one rotten apple in the entire bunch to get the entire group disqualified because they are not willing to listen, right? They just want to be the one speaking all the time. And I think, again, judging, so there's this interesting photograph, right? There's an interesting saying, actually. So if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, you'll always think that the fish is foolish. That's the same thing, right? So in a group discussion, I've never actually done well, because again, it boils down to your personality. So people who are very extroverted are actually good at it. People are introverts are not really good at being part of a random group of people and then fighting for the let's say
fighting for the handicaps people right before
absolutely
even beginning.
Absolutely. And there are people who are super confident who just sort of abduct the entire discussion, right? Hijack the entire discussion, and then they get sort of, let's say, then they get brownie points for that. So I think we need to come up with a better, more inclusive, system that gives people second opportunities, that focuses on everything, not just your academics, and that can actually figure out if a person is. So you could be an excellent candidate academically, but you might not be suited for an MBA, right? And even in an MBA, what the kind of role that you want to do will be tied to your specific abilities. Somebody who's a very extroverted person is suited for a consulting kind of a gig where they have to go out and talk to clients, their problem, right? But a person who is very introverted but a math genius is probably best suited for a sales and trading or an investment banking kind of a opportunity. Mm-hmm. So we need to have all of those enablers in place. I think we are getting there. Things have changed for the better in the last few years. But I think still, resting the fate of so many young people on a single JEE examination or a single CAT examination, I think it's not a good thing.
That's amazing, and that's very true. I want to switch gears at this point and talk about one of your most favorite things in a way. Like you mentioned, your reading habits. And I'm sure you have read like hundreds of books over the years. But could you list down some of the most important books, the books that you have learned the most from, or perhaps the ones that you have gifted the most to other people?
Absolutely, Krishna. So I think I've written about it also earlier, and so probably one of my favorite books would be To Kill a Mockingbird, right? Uh-huh. So I tried reading it when I was back in college, right, in my undergrad days. I couldn't get past the first 4 or 5 pages, right? Uh-huh. I don't know why, but again, it's something that is probably 13, 14 years in the past. And then someone gifted that book to me while I was, I think, in my post-grad, or probably I was already working. I don't remember that. But somebody gifted that to me, and I was leaving for home the other day to my parents' place. And I took it with me for the journey. I, again, didn't finish it on the journey. I reached home, and then, it was a couple of very lazy weeks there, right, having to do nothing. So one day I was just lying down on a cot in the front yard, and I just picked it up. And I somehow, I finished that book, I think, in the next 2.5 hours. It was amazing. It was a very weird, very surreal kind of an experience going through a story like that. Uh-huh. And I think a lot of my sense of morality, of justice, of right and wrong comes from the character of Atticus Finch, who's the father in that main book. And I think the book itself is a very amazing story about a young girl who sees all of these events unfolding in a small town in USA back in the days when there was rampant racism. So I think we've come a long way since then. But having gone through that book, it was the crux of the matter. The theme of the book was very simple, but the way the story was told, and I think the character Atticus Finch actually has been a cornerstone of morality across fiction for a long time now, and it's no different for me also. That is one book I absolutely recommend anyone to read. So, I mean, imagine the impact that a book has if an author if its author who has probably just written one book is famous, is renowned worldwide just because of that one literary creation. Uh-huh. So that is one. Second, one of my favorite books again would be the Bhagavad Gita, right? So I've read it a couple of times and I've gone through it a lot of times. I refer to it again because I think it's a wonderful treatise on human values, on morality, on your rights and your duties as a person, as a family member, and everything, right? Mm-hmm. And it lays down things on how to lead a good life. So a lot of its verses are probably very famous. But when it says that you should probably you should worry about doing your part and not worry about the outcome of your labor because that is not in your hands. That is something that I abide by. And I think I don't think it's a religious text. I mean, it's in Sanskrit, so people might call it a religious text. I don't think so because it doesn't really talk about religion or, a theology. It talks about how to lead a good life, how to be a good human being. So that would be probably my, one of my top 3 choices.
Do you have like a particular version? I'm sure there are like numerous versions of the Bhagavad Gita. So you read the one that was the original, the one written by Vedavyas, if I'm not mistaken, in Sanskrit.
No, so actually, I read so my favorite version would be the one by Swami Prabhupada, right, the founder of ISKCON, because he's done an amazing job translating everything from Sanskrit to English, and it's a very literal translation. So there's the Sanskrit words at the start, then he breaks down the words into that literal English meanings, and then he provides the proper translation. Right, translation. A lot of things get lost in translation because you have to keep in mind the literal translation, the actual intent behind that word, and a lot of words do not have a direct, what do you call it, a direct companion in a different language. So I think he's done a pretty good job. So I haven't gone through the original one, right? I think it's very difficult to find also. But this one, it's pretty amazing. And again, I think I told you earlier also that I just found that book. I was just unpacking a couple of a week ago. So I found that I still have it. So I'm again just going through it. I just finished the first 30 pages yesterday. So so that would be one absolutely. I mean, there are a lot of them, right? If I had to pick a favorite one, I think it'll be either of these two. And then there are a lot of other books that I absolutely love to read. But these two would be my top picks. And I think I would probably just, once I finish reading them once more, I have a huge stack of books, and it was actually a pain to carry all of them from Mumbai to Pune. So I'm thinking of sort of giving away some of the ones that I've already read, read multiple times. So I think books are meant to be gifted and shared. I mean, you don't really hoard them, and I've been hoarding them for the last so many years. So I'll probably just gift them, but I'm not really great at gifting and all of these sessions. I should probably do that. Yes.
So do you have like a favorite character from these books? I know you read a lot of fiction. Do you have like a character that particularly you thought it and you felt connected in a way, like, wow, I can totally relate to what this character is. Maybe it's some of their traits or the situation that they find themselves in that particular book.
Not really, right? I mean, to relate to a character, the character has to have, as you said, right, similar traits to yours. I don't think I'm that interesting of a person that, somebody would write a book about someone like me. I do like a lot of these fictional characters, right? And I think I've been inspired by some of them. I've learned a lot from a lot of them, but I've never found any character that resonated with me to the extent that I thought, okay, hey, it's similar to who I am as a person. But yeah, I think I've actually had a lot of characters have had a good impact on me. So yeah. So for example, I think you also asked me. So I think I read a lot of comics, right? So comics, I think is used to be considered a children's medium of fiction. But if you actually delve deep into it, into let's say the two mainstream publishers, DC and Marvel, and into some of these other niche indie publishers like IDW and Image Comics and Variant and all. So you'll find that a lot of these story arcs are very powerful. A lot of them, and telling a story over 70-75 years in continuity, right, with multiple authors coming in, multiple viewpoints, multiple iterations of the same character, and still keeping the essence of a character alive is a huge achievement. So I think in comics, I think one of my favorite characters is Superman. I mean, it comes as a shock to a lot of people, but I think the core of who Superman is at the heart of things is something that everybody should aspire to be, right? He's an all-powerful being who's really should not be concerned about people who are nothing to him. Like people are like termites or insects to him in terms of where he stands as far as power level. But he cares for them. I think he's someone who's a perfect human being in every sense of the word, despite the fact that he can actually choose not to be. He's outside the purview of the law. There's nothing that can stop him. But he chooses to be, even in the darkest of moments. So I think, that's there. So I'd say across books and comics, a lot of these characters would have, and when you actually read things, when you talk to people, so you imbibe a lot of their traits and you take away a lot of things from them, right? So there's a saying that goes that you are you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, and that's actually true. So if you talk to someone a lot, if you spend a lot of time with someone in particular, you will slowly realize that you start mirroring their movements, their eccentricities, their style, right? You adjust. And I think the same goes for reading also, because it's a companion when you are sort of alone. And when you like a character when you get into, actually get into reading, you'll slowly realize that a lot of what you read shapes up who you are, your thinking, your outlook on life, your perspective. So I think in that regard, I think reading has helped me develop a very holistic, and I would actually not want to talk about it on a public forum, but I think I was pretty narrow-minded back, I think, let's say a decade and a half back, right? Because I wasn't that narrow-minded because I actually spent my childhood traveling across the country. So we started off in Uttarakhand, we went to Pune, then we moved to Shakapatnam, then we moved to Bhatinda in Punjab, we moved to Guwahati, then I came back to Vizag to finish my schooling, then I went off to Goa where there were like people from every corner of the country. And I have friends from, everywhere, from Assam, from Punjab, from MP, from Bihar, from Andhra, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Gujarat. I spent two years of my life, and so I think I still had a very decently balanced perspective, a very nuanced understanding of the cultural variety that makes India a very unique country. But I still think that once I started reading very seriously towards probably the first or second year of my college life, I think that actually helped me gain a lot of perspective because I could then relate to things that hadn't happened to me in my real life. So I could relate to let's say the cultural eccentricities of a country like USA, right? How people feel. I had very little idea of racism. I had a good idea about casteism because it's prevalent in India, but I had very little idea of racism and its history. I read about that. And I think slowly over the years, so my overall outlook towards issues like, the LGBT cause or people's personal preferences, right? I mean, a lot of people will tell you that it's, most of things in life are binary, right? There's light, there's dark, there's yes, no, up, down, left, right. And that is how, let's say, a gender should be. I don't think, right? So, I mean, if you look at black and white, you have an entire spectrum of gray in the middle. So I think most of life is a spectrum. And I think I've come to terms with the fact that people's choices are theirs. And just because things have been happening in a particular way, doesn't mean that they should, that's the right way or that that is how it should continue. And I've come to, I mean, it was, I think, for a 15-year-old me, it would be very difficult to come to grasp with the fact that, there are people who are born a particular gender and they feel like other gender and they should be allowed to do that. But in hindsight now, I don't think, I think that's absolutely the nice thing or the right thing to do, right? Because it's, first of all, it's nobody's business. And second of all, just because you can't think that broadly doesn't really mean that, that is how things should be. So, I've been guilty of making, let's say, homophobic jokes when I was probably in my 9th or 10th standard, right? And I'll admit to it. Because I think at that time there was not this level of awareness in the youth. There was not a lot of social media, so you could probably not talk to people who have this. You had a very constrained localized friend circles. So that was fine, I think, but we have to move on from that thing. So in a sense, so I think reading also has contributed because I've been able to learn a lot about things I probably will never experience, right? So throughout the world, different cultures, different nuances. And I think that has helped me develop a very decently holistic, all-encompassing perspective of how things should be, and not just, my very localized way or very narrow way of thinking about it. So in a sense, all of these characters, all of these stories, and all of these true books that have been written about true events, they've actually helped me become who I am today.
Maybe I think since you brought up Superman and comics, now would be a good time to discuss one of your favorite characters on the whole big screen. I mean, recently and comics for a long time, the Joker from Dark Knight. For folks listening, the context is Deepak has, in a lot of his answers, brought up Joker's, I wouldn't call it point of view, but maybe something on the lines of what would Joker do or how his perspective is. It seems like you have put a lot of thought into the character to try to understand what drives the Joker in some ways. And I think that's something that we have all tried to do at some point, whether it was seeing him in the Dark Knight like nearly a decade ago or from Joker itself last year. Was it last year or early this?
Yes, I think 2018, 2019, yes.
So what is it about the character Joker that fascinates you, that you bring him up and wherever it makes sense to do so?
I think I find that character very interesting, Krish. I think, and just because you like a character doesn't mean you admire them or you look up to them or you agree with their methods or their thinking, right? I mean, he's essentially a psychopath, right? But if you get the core of it, that character has been around for more than 8 decades now, right? And is literally one of the most recognizable villains in all of fiction, not just comics, right? So you can argue that in comics he's probably the greatest, most well-known villain. And you could probably put him in terms of all of fiction. You could put him against someone like Darth Vader from Star Wars, right, or Voldemort from Harry Potter. But the idea is that all of these characters, the other 2 characters that I mentioned, they have a very limited, comparatively limited amount of literature about them. Joker has been around for the last 8 decades, and at the face of it, the entire gimmick should have died away. Died off probably just a few years into the character's creation. So you essentially have a clown who thinks everything's funny, right? And this original version was someone like that, like the original caricature of Joker was someone who just did things for fun, and he had these very stupid gigs. He had this umbrella or that flower or label on his chest that could squirt out a liquid, and he was just a harmless prankster at the very start. And that is, I think, how Cesar Romero's character was portrayed on the big screen. But then slowly over the years, we follow comics, that character being able to, as I said, right, being able to continue the story for 80 years when a lot of people come in, a lot of new perspectives come in regularly, writers change, storytellers change, editors change. But to keep the essence of the character alive is a very fine balancing act. So if you look at the character, it started off as a harmless prankster. Then sometime in the Silver Age, it was a mob boss, right? And we still do not know exactly his backstory. So he was probably Red Hood at some point. He was probably a stand-up comic who got dejected and killed his wife. Or he was just someone who lost his, family, and then, it drove him mad. There's this entire backstory about him falling into a vat of chemicals and during a robbery gone wrong, and that leads to his madness. But I think recently, probably in the New 52, or probably just before that, in one of the storylines, it was revealed that he's probably immortal, and there have been iterations of the Joker. Different people taking up the mantle of the Joker over the last few years, and there's hinting at there's been hints such as immortality, because there are clues that he's been around for probably 3 or 4 centuries. And I think keeping all of this alive, right? So one of the lines from The Dark Knight is that, when asked about his past, he says, if I have a past, I prefer it to be multiple choice. And we don't actually get to see. And there was a very there was a very interesting storyline a couple of years back, I believe, when Batman actually gets access to the Mobius chair. It's a chair which grants you omniscience, right, in terms of the entire knowledge of the universe. And one of the first questions he asks is, who's the Joker? What's his real identity? And then he gets an answer. We don't get to hear what the answer was. And his eyes go wide. So it was probably a response that he didn't expect. And then it was revealed that there were 3 Jokers with 3 different personalities all throughout Gotham. So I think at the end of it, and again, as I told you, I think earlier, I've been getting back into comics. And one of the storylines that I am reading right now is the entire Justice League run and the previous Dark Knight Metal run by Scott Snyder. So in that, you have a corrupted version of, of Batman, who is permanently transformed by the Joker's toxin. And so it's a new character that Scott Snyder developed called the Batman Who Laughs. It's a scary amalgamation of both Batman and Joker.
Wow.
And the Joker draws a line saying that I am not going to work with this person because this person is from a dark multiverse. He's from a negative or a opposite multiverse than the normal one. And he draws a line saying that this is a monstrosity. I am not willing to work with him. So there are places where he will draw the line. And in all of that storyline, among all of these very weird, very new villains, a literal goddess who created all of the DC main multiverse, right? A lot of these creations from the other side, the dark multiverse, and the fact that Lex Luthor in this storyline gains almost godlike omnipotence. And still, Joker is one of the main characters. He's probably the most interesting character about this entire Justice League run. And I think I have seen that in almost all of the comics that I've read, which featured him as a as a main or a secondary character, that somehow is able to steal the show. So I think just the fact that he's been around for so long, that he started off with a very pale, very vanilla kind of a gimmick, and then evolved into this very complex, nuanced character that still is able to draw people to the works that he's featured in. I think all of that makes him a very interesting, very unique fictional construct, and doesn't really mean that I admire him or his methods, obviously, but I think that is one of the most well-written, most nuanced characters that is there in fiction.
Wow. Have you written this entire explanation somewhere as an answer?
I think I've thought about it, right? So yeah, I've thought about it, and I think I did write a couple of answers, but not from this perspective. But yeah, I think I'll be very honest that it's the reason that Batman's so famous is because he has a wonderful rogue gallery, and Joker being one of them elevates him to a very different status than other superheroes. Mm-hmm. So Superman has Lex Luthor, you have Victor Von Doom for the Fantastic Four, and he's again one of my Von Doom, Doctor Doom is one of my favorite characters. But again, none of these amazingly written, detailed characters stand in front of the Joker. So he's one level, one notch above everyone else, even the best written out of them.
This is also the reason why he goes beyond. This is the reason why he is so much more famous also. I mean, I have never read a comic in my life. My understanding of the Joker is basically from 2 movies, but still we could still relate to what he is up to. In a way, he taps in a lot of our innermost perspectives on things that we don't really tend to entertain.
And you can actually take him in, you can understand him in different forms. You can portray him in very radically different forms. So if you look at just the last 3 movies, the Joker from The Dark Knight, Heath Ledger's, was a very unique interpretation of the character, right? It was all about chaos and just doing things to do it, right, without any singular motive. Then you had Jared Leto's Joker, which was not well received, but I think that was the fault of the movie to an extent because it was not well put together. The CGI was shoddy, the storyline was weak, and then his character didn't really have a lot of time on screen. But that was the absolute psychopath version of the Joker. And then what we saw with Joaquin Phoenix's portrayal in the Joker movie was something very different, right? And it actually gives a very human angle to his backstory, to his entire persona. I mean, again, doesn't justify the things that he does, shooting all of those people and all. But again, so you have 3 very radically different interpretations of the same character coming in just 10 years, and all of them have been good, right? I mean, you can argue that Jared Leto's wasn't as good, but they've all been very different and very unique and very exciting to an extent. Yeah. So when you have a character that malleable, I think you have something very great on your hands.
Yeah, I think at this point he is sort of transformed from this comic villain to an anti-hero.
In the Joker movie, from his perspective, yes. But if you look at a lot of these characters, right, so you have to explore storylines and angles. So if you look at all these characters, Magneto does similar stuff, right? I mean, he kills a lot of people. But if you look at things from his perspective, he's just doing the best he can to protect mutant kind, right? And you actually empathize with him in a lot of storylines. The same goes for, let's say, a Doctor Doom or even a Green Goblin, that was actually Joker rip-off for Marvel to some extent. But if you actually delve deep into comics, you'll find that there's something for everyone. There are storylines taken from the perspective of the actual villains, which you might resonate with. So I think, that makes, I think, comics also a very unique medium. So you have thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of storylines going back to 70, 80 years. And you have to piece all of that together. It's a very amazing mythos that they've been able, these last 2 companies have been able to build over the years.
That's true. I think 2020 is this is the closest thing here in real life to the comics that we see. Mayhem.
Yeah, very interesting year.
Do you think, looking at all the things that has happened in this year, can you think of anything that will be a silver lining? to come out of this entire crisis?
Absolutely. I think you have to have that perspective, right? Otherwise, there's so much wrong going on in the world that if you just focus on the negatives, it's going to be a very difficult time for everyone. But you have to look at the larger picture, right? So when people say that, let's take the entire case of the protest going on and the BLM protest going on in America. If you look at just those protests in isolation, the incidents that led to them, you'll feel that the US is a very dangerous place for, let's say, black people. But you have to look at where we have come from. I mean, again, we have a long way to go. But today, right now, the world is better than it has ever been in the past in terms of, let's say, issues like feminism or LGBT acceptance, about let's say the BLM movement, in terms of economic growth. Just a second. Sorry. Yeah. So I was saying that things right now are better than they ever were. Right. So you have to look at those things. So all of these protests happening, they're there for the good. Right now, it's a fight, right? But I think something good will come out of it. And at the same time, for example, if you look at this entire epidemic going on, epidemics and pandemics are going to come and go, right? Pathogens evolve, and we are never going to be immune to all kinds of pathogens out there. So this is going to happen. Better today than probably 15 years ago when we didn't have technology to rescue us, right? So imagine this happening in India in the year 2000 when there wasn't social media, there was no online delivery, right? And how would things have been managed, right? So right now everybody's working towards a common goal to get to the vaccine the fastest. So the idea is that this incident also is going to transform the world. I mean, I am thinking of this as sort of a mini purge, right? So you have a lot of these tail businesses going out of business. Again, people are losing their jobs, which is absolutely devastating. But this will actually cleanse the the current setup, right? So you'll have all of these frail, outdated, outmoded businesses going out. You'll have a lot of new innovative companies coming into the limelight on the back of this. This has actually helped transform the entire, let's say, the entire work industry in terms of working from home. So once you have, and I think people have been pushing from working from home for a long time, but companies, especially old companies, especially Indian companies, have been very reluctant to agree to that, citing reasons that this will lead to a decrease in productivity, and there's no way you can measure if employees are actually working. So that trust factor is not there. But this now, because they have no other option, and I'll tell you very frankly that I have not seen a drop in productivity in my team or in, let's say, my colleagues within my current company, right? And actually, it's just gone up because people now don't have to spend 2 hours a day to commute, right? So when this happens, you look at the ripple effects. So a lot of these commercial real estate is going to get freed up. You don't have to have companies at the center of a city, and then just outside on the outskirts, you have these very expensive apartments, and people who can afford it live there, and you pay exorbitant rent just to be able to just so that you're close to your where you work, and you don't have to spend 2 to 3 hours stuck in traffic. So I think a lot of these things will go away, right? A lot of real estate gets freed up. Companies' cost of operating go down, so that would mean better profits, probably more salaries for the employees. People are more happy because they can actually work from the comfort of their home. And eventually, over time, you will see that these mega cities that have cropped up, right? Because cities crop up because you have a central, place where things are happening with their industries, and then people start living, and then it starts expanding outwards. And that is how the situation in India is. So if you look at the top 10, top 20 cities, they house probably 20-30% of India's population. And the rest of the country is empty, and you don't have opportunities there because everybody wants to come to a Bombay or a Chennai or Delhi or Bangalore, Hyderabad to work because their opportunities are there. But if somebody in let's say Chandigarh or Nainital, or probably in Ranchi can work for a Mumbai-based company out of their home, it's good, right? I think, and then Bombay, the population pressure eases, everything goes back to, it becomes better than it was. So that's probably one silver lining. This has taught us to be more.
Have you followed what Zoho is doing? Sridhar Vembu, CEO.
No, I mean, just if you could give me some context.
So Zoho obviously is like one of the poster childs of Indian SaaS ecosystem. So
Yes.
Sridhar Vembu, its CEO, is actually working out of this small town called Tenkasi. Like, not a lot of, I come from Trichy and not a lot of people have heard of Trichy itself. Tenkasi is like at least like 2-3 levels below that. I mean, I don't mean it in an offensive or condescending way, but just give some context. But this CEO, runs this multi-billion enterprise, and he has been working out of this village, with cows and the agricultural lands and everything right in the middle of it. He has been working from his home, where he originally came from in Tenkasi, for like more than a year now, I guess.
Oh, brilliant.
And he's someone who has been pushing this whole efforts to bring back this urban population, like you mentioned, to urging them to go back to their home cities, tier 2, tier 3 towns. I mean, otherwise there is no way that they are going to come up in terms of the economic opportunities available, unless someone powerful and influential who can actually like take the initiative and do things like this.
Agreed. And if you look at it, right, that should be the idea. Working should not be about coming to a particular place and then, being there for 9 to 10 hours and then working and then going home, and, you lead a very stressful life. So I actually felt that a couple of weeks after I moved to Pune. So Pune is still a very big city, but right now I'm in the outskirts of Pune, in Hinjawadi. So it's relatively far peaceful than a normal city would be. And in Bombay, I used to feel that stress, right? So even if you step out, you see a lot of people, you see a lot of automobiles going around, and you live in a crowded place. I used to probably shell out 1/4 of my take-home salary on just the rent itself, right? It's a huge wastage of money, and it's all, the entire real estate thing is blown up. There's a huge bubble in all of these major cities. So if people can actually do that, I would rather take a 50% cut and stay home with my parents. And if I can actually work out of there, right? I think it makes a lot of sense. A lot of the work now can be done remotely. In the last 4 or 5 years, we have had this internet boom in India thanks to Jio, and but then other players following suit. And my place, which didn't really have electricity 2 decades ago, now has a 100 Mbps connection in back home. So a lot of things are transforming, and I think industries have been very slow to adapt to that. So I think this was the final push that was needed. For example, I'm not sure if you would have experienced this, but in a lot of these big companies, for example, in my company only, right, till last year, for every quarter, all of the senior management from our global locations in US and UK and all would travel to India every quarter for a week to attend the board meetings in person.
Oh,
there's no reason why that cannot be done online. But that was the norm, it was being followed. So imagine the carbon footprint of flying from New York to Mumbai. Imagine the stress, imagine the wastage of resources, the time wastage at a senior level. That is all being avoided now, right? Everybody is working out, everybody is working, the entire world is getting back to normal, and people, I don't think more than 10%, 15% people in India are in offices yet. And things are still going smoothly. So I think this was the push that was needed. So that's one good silver lining.
In a way, it's actually a lot better now. Even take my case. Earlier, when I was working, when I was just a couple of episodes in with the podcast, there was always this pressure, I have to like travel back and forth 2 hours a day, just like you mentioned. And then I only would have had like weekends to focus on the podcast. Right now, I'm like, I can just come sit for like 8-9 hours, and I literally save 2 hours every day. That's like 14 hours in 1 week itself that I can spend on reading, on my side projects. And
exactly. And the thing is, see, nobody is able to, nobody can actually concentrate on work for 8 hours straight, right? You can maximum concentrate for an hour and a half, then you need to take a break. If you are in office, the break that you take is probably for coffee or, for a smoke.
You're forced to get back to this work mode even when it doesn't make sense to do so.
I just wasted time. So if I take a break every 1.5 hours, 15-20 minutes, I'm not doing anything productive. At home, I can probably just clean up my place, right? Do a small 15-minute workout session. So you get all of that time to yourself. And as you said rightly, right? People in Mumbai, for example, travel from Kalyan and Dombivli to, let's say, Worli at the south of Bombay, and it's a 4-hour journey either way, and then you spend half an hour getting ready.
Wow.
So it's a lot of wasted time. Imagine, so multiply, let's say 1 hour on average for every working person in India every day. So imagine the number of years, human years it adds up to every year. So that's insane, and we're saving all of this time, and things should have been this way for almost a decade and a half now since the advent of the internet. But that is not the case, right? People have been working more when they should be working less. Mm-hmm. We have all of these tools and these programs, this technology to help us, automation and all. But they're just pouring in more and more time into work. So people in the industrial era used to probably work 6 hours a day, 7 hours a day. Now they are working 10, 12 hours a day. And there are these books about CEOs working 120 hours, 140, 160. I read something that said 120 or 130 hours for someone, right? I think Marissa Mayer or someone. That's insane. You shouldn't be doing that, right? The primary goal of life is not to work. So the primary goal of life is to be happy and to have a wonderful life, and the work is just an enabler for you to earn money to have that comfort. But I think somehow these things got lost in the past few decades, and I think this is something that was a push that was needed. Right? When you have no other option, you have to try it out, and now companies are more amenable to this. So a lot of Indian bigwigs have said that. Infosys, TCS, and have said that probably half of their workforce will be working remotely even after the pandemic goes away in a few months. Right? So that's a welcome change.
That's true. Do you see the educational system transforming as a result of this? And I don't just mean at kids sitting at their homes on their tablets and mobile phones. Our education system has been overdue a big change. And the pandemic only does that to a certain extent, right? Unless the whole work from home setup for students and the kind of syllabus, it's still the same. Since I am sitting at home, I see my brother studying here, and he's still studying the same kind of things I studied, which was like 12 years back. The syllabus, he's writing handwriting for pages and pages. And after graduating, I can bet that he's not going to write a page, as in like on a paper. You can argue all for writing on paper over document, but this is just one instance. There are a lot more dumb things this education system still forces us to do. What are some of the changes that you wish might start cropping out as a result of this?
Okay, I don't have a very specific, very informed view on that, right? Of how this might actually affect the education sector. But things that I would love, changes that I would love in the way the kids are being taught these days. I mean, there are a few things, right? As you rightly mentioned, the syllabus needs to be revamped, right? Today, programming languages that were in fashion, let's say probably a decade ago, no longer are. And just to sort of piggyback on your point, so while I was in college, a lot of our coding examinations, right, in BITS, used to be on paper. So you have to write the code on paper. That doesn't make any sense at all. So while in the real world, you'll have a compiler, they'll throw out errors, right? You'll be able to troubleshoot them by figuring out solutions on the web, and that is how you're supposed to work. But you are expected to memorize stuff as if we are in an era. Right. I mean, before computers, let's say that was a big deal. I mean, you had to memorize stuff. Otherwise, if you don't remember something, you have to go to a library, figure out where a book is, right? And then rely on the judgment of probably the librarian to get you the right book, go through it, right? And then just to find that one piece of information. Right now, all you have to do is just, unlock your mobile, which you don't have to type a passcode now, right? You just look at it, it opens, and there's a Google search bar. You just put in that particular query, and you get a response within 5 seconds. So things have changed. The world has changed, but the education sector has sort of remained stagnant. So I think sticking to the same curriculum, the idea that kids of, let's say, a particular age should be in the same grade, right? If you are 15, you probably are expected to be in the 9th or 10th standard. And from the start, there's this very standard way of teaching students, right? There's no customization. There's no accommodating the fact that people start learning at a different age, at a different pace. Somebody who might be slow. I think, again, it's a very personal anecdote, and I'm not sure my sister will like it, but she was very slow when she was in her initial years of school, right? And my parents were very worried. but she was a late bloomer when it came to, let's say, education, and she's picked up wonderfully. She's a far better coder than I am, right? She's amazing at her job, and she's really doing good. And we just realized that later that probably for her it was a different path, and I think that is how, if you force down the same mode, the same content on kids who have different cognitive abilities, different level of understanding when they are, let's say, 5 years old, when they start school, different interests, then you're actually just pushing out a very standardized, very factory mode, output in terms of the students that go out, right? So you need to factor in the different unique strengths and unique inclinations of students, right? I think a lot of stress should be placed on online learning, right? So you have these wonderful websites like Coursera, like Khan Academy, like DTX and all, where you can actually go in on any topic. And that is something that I've been doing for the past 8-9 years now. And that was one of the reasons I started this blog called University of Quora, where I would just write about things that I think people would find useful, right? About resources that were free or were available for a nominal price, and you can actually learn everything. You might not have a background in computer science, but you can actually learn coding in probably just six months, right? A couple of important languages, and you can actually get an entry-level job without having a computer science degree. And I believe I read an article. I'm not really sure if that was that's a fact or if I remember that correctly, but it said that couple of large companies like Apple and all are rethinking or have actually changed their policy when it comes to hiring. So they'll no longer look at your educational background. So just because somebody got into an Harvard or a Yale or a Columbia doesn't mean that they're better than someone who didn't go, because the other person might have had very different set of circumstances which prevented them from being able to get that opportunity, right? So this actually levels the playing field, right? So if you have to get into Harvard, you need to be from a privileged background. You need to be able to spare that amount of money, that amount of coaching, that amount of focus that your parents have from the very beginning. But if your parents are working, they don't have time for you, right? They're just focused on ensuring the 3 square meals a day kind of a setup. Then you are left in the dust. You don't have the resources, you don't have that access, right? And there was this, again, a very wonderful article about privilege that said that a lot of successful entrepreneurs actually come from privileged families where they have a safety net, right? So you might want to start a business, you might have an amazing idea, and you never know, right? If it might become the next big thing, it might fail spectacularly like 90%, 95% of startups do. But you as a very common person, or you and I as let's say as a middle class or lower middle class, whatever you might call it, person who doesn't really have a safety net, who can't afford to be out of job for a year, you can't do anything, right? So you either do that in your part-time and you're only half-heartedly into it, and you can't take that risk of leaving a job. So you don't take that leap, and obviously you don't reach anywhere.
I remember seeing a comic on the same lines. I think it was shared by
one of my favorite. Yes. One of my favorite is called On a Plate by Pencil Sword. And it talks about, and it does an amazing, beautiful job of explaining how privilege can lead you to different stations in life, right?
I leave that on the show notes as well. Yeah,
absolutely, that would be one. I think I'd recommend that to almost everyone, because it tells you everything about privilege in just probably 20-25 odd panels. So the idea is that education now, because of these online learning avenues, has become accessible, right? So one of the first courses that I did on Coursera was this one on financial markets by a certain Robert Schiller, right? And that person teaches at Yale. He's the head of, he's the professor of economics there, a distinguished professor. He actually won a Nobel Prize in economics. So imagine being able to learn from someone like that without having to go to US, right? Without having to attend his classes and being sitting probably thousands of miles away in Mumbai. So the opportunities are endless. So that is, I think, one more thing, right? So you have the syllabus that needs to change. You have customized learning for kids based on their interests and their strengths. You need to have online learning become a major component. So probably, there should be some way. So in US, a lot of these online courses actually give you credit towards your college courses, right? So you don't, even college, if you have to have 20 credits and you do a course which is for 1 credit accredited by that particular college, you have to just do 19 courses, right? Which is good enough. So a lot of this flexibility needs to come in. And again, as you said, with the work from home situation, if it's like this, then parents actually have time to spend with their kids, and they can actually focus on all of these resources. We need to create more visibility, more awareness around these opportunities that are there, but people do not really make the best out of it. So that has to change. And I think, again, in India specifically, the focus has to sort of shift away from just science and engineering and medical to other fields, right? So we have had a very narrow focus in terms of, so everybody would have, I think this is something that a lot of Indian people our age would have heard, right? Engineering mein hi scope hai. Yeah, I mean, do engineering because that is the one that will give you the most career opportunities, which was true for some time. But again, that doesn't mean that you can't earn a good livelihood in some, let's say, journalism or pursuing photography or doing freelancing work, being a stand-up comic, being anything. Right now, the avenues are endless. So there are kids on TikTok and YouTube making videos on a regular basis, earning far more than I would be after 8 years and, working after MBA and all. So I think it's a very good thing, right? The playing field has been leveled. You don't have to rely on a particular company or a particular college, getting into a college, right? You don't have to bank upon all of those chance outcomes in order to have a promising or a successful career. So you can actually just sit at your home and be doing what you like, and you have all of these opportunities. All you need is probably a laptop, and that you can purchase for 20,000 rupees now, right? Which is not a big deal for most of the people again. So this has to change, I think. So education has to be something which is, education system in India and across the world has to be something which is very fluid, which keeps on changing as per, how the world is evolving, how technology is evolving. And that is something that we haven't really seen, right? So as you said, CBSE syllabus, if you take it right now, it's literally the same thing that was being taught to us 7, 10, 12 years ago, probably 2 decades ago. And things might just have moved up a little, a couple of notches in terms of, kids nowadays probably are learning in the 8th standard what we used to learn in the 9th or 10th standard. That's the only difference. But there's the same focus on the same set of
what would be your first step? Like, say if you had the chance to do something about this, specifically the Indian educational system, where do you even start? Like, I mean, I know you brought up a lot of points, and as much as it makes sense, I honestly don't see any of them happening in overnight or in a year or even maybe in half a decade. So what would be a good starting point of that change from where it can probably, be a cascading effect?
I mean, you could always, it has to be done probably from the top down. So you need to set up a committee which looks at the curriculum every year, sees what needs to change, what is outdated, right? Remove it, right? Keep it dynamic. So that could be one change that the government or the HRD ministry could, start working on. We need to have more career counseling, in school, probably, let's say in the secondary or higher secondary education. We need to have more freedom for kids, to choose their subject. So still you have the same set of subjects. I was just talking about that. So you have the same set of subjects. You start off with, let's say, 2 languages, English and Hindi, and then probably a local vernacular language in a lot of state schools. And then you have maths, you have science, you have social sciences. That's pretty much it. Right? What about economics? What about history? Right? What about, let's say, philosophy? What about psychology? A lot of these factors have to be considered. So obviously maths, something like a maths or English is very basic. You have to do it, right? It's the foundation of a lot of things. But people should not have to wait until they are in their 11th standard to say, okay, I want to, let's say, be an engineer, so I'll go with maths, and I want to get into, let's say, physics, mechanical engineering, so I will focus on maths and physics, right? Or why I want to be a doctor, so I'll probably skip maths and focus on biology as my core subject. You should be able to give people that, give kids that option early on, so that they can actually. So I don't think 2 years of focused medical syllabus actually prepares you for medical school. And I think we waste a lot of time reading about things that we should not be, right? Which doesn't really add up to, which doesn't really help us in where we want to go. So if I was given a chance, for example, I would probably skip Hindi, right? For example, or probably Sanskrit. It was it was good to learn, obviously. But the idea is that I could have learned something else. We still have the same subjects, right? I had zero idea about economics or finance or about all of these,
negotiations,
arts subjects. Absolutely. Yeah. So these are subjects that could be taught as a very focused 3-month course. You don't even have to spend a year on it, right? So let's say the art of negotiation, let's say international trade, right? So just to give people in flavor, introductory course on that. So if somebody wants to pursue career in that, is interested in reading about it, so they can take up following intermediate or advanced courses in that. So we need to change the way schools are run. I'm not very in sync with how the system is right now. There are a lot of boards. There's CBSE, ICSE, there's the international board and all. But I think I've heard good things about the way the international board does things, right? We need to have a lot of more focus on hobbies. So we used to have probably one class every week for sports, which is insane, right? Why? Physical development is as important as mental development. So you have you need to have probably an hour every day where kids can focus on their physical health, right? They can focus on sport, they can focus on working out, on probably just meditation, right? If they like. At the same time, there has to be a lot of focus on developing hobbies, right? So we had these classes when we were young on painting or elocution and all. But that just stopped when I sort of went to 6th or 7th standard.
Yeah, exactly.
But you need to give people those avenues, right? Somebody is interested in music, they should be able to spend an hour a day learning music in school, right? Probably going through some courses on music theory or blah blah blah. So the idea is that people should have these choices. We should not look down upon hobbies as something that is you do in your pastime. Hobbies are important, interests are important, and so this could be one more change that we bring in. And I think finally, I would love if we started following the Nordic model very closely, right? Where you don't really gauge, you're not out there to test who's the best student in the class. Your aim is not to boast about your average 10th, the average score of all of your 10th class students, right? So a lot of the schools do this, that, the topper for our topper 10th topper is probably the third rank in the state. I mean, it's a huge competition. Why are we doing this to kids? So Nordic model basically doesn't really have tests except for the standardized tests that help kids figure out their colleges and all later on where they want to get to. And it's more about understanding and accepting that kids start learning at a different age. They pick up at a different pace. They have their own cognitive differences in terms of overall ability also. But every kid has that opportunity to explore everything, figure out what they want to do without the pressure of these examinations and this hyper competitive setup that we have in India. And I think that is something we need to imbibe. So it doesn't really matter if a kid in first standard got 90% or 70%. Absolutely, that doesn't matter in life also. But then you start drilling that into a 70% guy from the start, that he or she is not good enough. Right, and that actually probably leads to them becoming a dysfunctional adult with little confidence, right, with doubt in their own abilities, and it never allows them to actually explore their full potential. So that, I think, Nordic model, if you could, I can again share a link with you later on, but if you could actually follow that is the ideal way to go right now until something better comes up.
Yeah, that perhaps as a follow-up to this discussion on educational system, maybe let's talk a little bit about marriages. I mean, on the face of it, they are not really tied up, but from a societal perspective, they are. It couldn't be any closer, actually. What you study defines what kind of a bride or groom you get. It's that intertwined, actually. And also, I do. This is very weird. I'm already worried for my prospects. So that is prospects in air quotes, because I did only Bachelor of Commerce. So maybe, and I know that you have a very strong and a very balanced opinion on our marriage system, just like the one that you talked about on our educational system. So just, I'm just going to leave it open-ended like that. What do you think is wrong with the current system?
I think we also treat marriage as a very standardized activity, right? There's a set way of going about it. So I just had
Check.
Friend of. So I just had a friend for dinner yesterday, right? So we were in school together. So he's also turning 30. So he's also turned 30 this year. I've also turned 30. I've been married for the last 5 years, and that was my personal choice, right? He's not, it's his personal choice, but he just told me an incident where his family is worried about it because his parents have now retired from their jobs, and they're worried about him finding a good girl, right? And the same quips, right? Already 30, how late do you want things to be? When we were your age, we already had you, and you were 5 years old and all that, right? So, and he recently got added to a group which was about a particular caste and marriages within that caste, which had probably 300 members, and he was shocked, and he just left that group, and then he got an earful about it from his parents because they were the ones who added him to that.
I'm sorry, but this is like eerily similar to a lot of stories that I hear from obviously not my marriage. Also both the extremes. Right now, I'm too young to talk about marriage also. I can't even have a perspective on marriages because I'm only 22. But when I turn 30, I'd be too late to,
Exactly. Yes.
It's just I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, absolutely. That's fine. Yeah, I think, yeah. So it was a very amazing, very hilarious conversation. I could relate to him, right? And then the idea is, in India, marriage is seen as something that you have to do at a fixed time, right? So you start school at 5, you finish school at 17, you graduate at 21, you probably do your master's at 23, 24. And then in a couple of years after getting your master's, after settling in your job, 27, you're 25, 26, 27, you're supposed to get married. For girls, it's at a younger age a little bit. And then you are supposed to have kids by the time you're 30. And that is something that my parents and in-laws have been hounding me for the last 4 or 5 years. So I told them, when we planned to marry early in our 25, right, that time you had a problem saying that it's no age to get married. And now you are telling us that it's too late to have kids, right? So it doesn't really make sense. You can't have your cake and eat it too. So you have to figure out what, either we're too early or too late. So marriage also, I think, arranged marriages, I have a very strong view on, and I'm sure that a lot of people would not agree with it, right? Mm-hmm. But the way arranged marriages can actually work, right? But you need to have a good enough time between meeting someone for the first time and then actually getting married to them. But in India, it doesn't really happen, right? You're supposed to just go meet, have a couple of 3-4 sessions with them for an hour each, and then figure out who they are as a person, and then decide on whether you want to be their life partner for the next 60-70 years then, which I think is insane, right? I mean, I, for example, do not buy a shoe or a t-shirt online without reading about it for an hour, right? Without probably giving it a night's rest. So how is someone expected to figure out who they want to spend their entire life with? And that is a very important person, right? I mean, you spend a lot of time after you graduate away from your parents. You don't spend a lot of time with your friends. You probably just spend 8 hours in office, right? But and that keeps changing. Your teams keep changing. Your roles keep changing. But this one person is someone you'll spend probably 10 to 12 hours every day with for the rest of your life. And you need to be sure of your compatibility before you take that plunge. But in India, there's a lot of social pressure, right? You have all of these uncles and aunties hounding your parents, and they in turn, venting out their frustration on you to get married. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to relook at it, right? Love marriages are not bad. A higher divorce rate is not bad. Mm-hmm. That actually points to the fact. So I have heard this argument in a couple of places that divorce rates are rising, so which means that the younger generation, current generation, doesn't really have a grasp, and that love marriages do not work. Absolutely wrong. In love marriages, when two people decide to get married because they love each other, so they are doing that because they have that option, right? So they probably come from a more liberal, right, not family in terms of the mindset. And if they get divorced later on, that actually means that they both have that choice. Mm-hmm. Right. In let's say probably 100 years ago, women didn't have a lot of say in the marriages. Uh-huh. Right. Men would probably just desert their wives and go on to marry someone else. There was nothing about divorce. So there was nothing about female let's say empowerment, which allowed them to probably go and file for a divorce if they were not happy with it. And that is how people just accommodated, people adjusted, people put up with, let's say, physical abuse, verbal abuse, with incompatibility, with discontentment, and then the outcome of that was a lower divorce rate because there was no system for that, mm-hmm. right? So now people have that option. So I think the marriage industry in India also needs to change, right? It's perfectly fine if you get married when you're 22, someone like you. It's perfectly fine to get married when you are 35. It's perfectly to remarry. It's perfectly to divorce, right? It's perfectly right to divorce. And that entire taboo around divorcees, especially women, the entire taboo around widows has to change. The entire hatred or sort of dislike for love marriages has to change. There's nothing wrong in people knowing each other before marriage, deciding to marry of their own volition. It's not a encroachment on the parents' right if their kids decide who the life partner should be. It should be their decision. And at the same time, I think the entire marriage industry in India still, sorry to say, but is still very caste focused, right? So the previous example that I gave.
I mean, right before this conversation, there were at least 3 different ads, community focused matrimony ads.
Yes. Which is
I don't want to go about pointing out names, but you get the picture, right? I mean, people have turned this into a business as if caste wasn't infiltrating every other part of your life.
I mean, that is one, but you look at stuff like IIMshadi.com, which is insane, right? So now there's a classist angle to it, to marriages. So you're supposed to marry someone of your own, within your own standing, within your own social status, which is insane. Why should that be the case? You go and marry anyone you like, right? But India, that is not the case.
There's a freaking elite matrimony. What? I mean, like, how elite matrimony? Like, it just sounds so wrong to even bring that up.
Elite matrimony, okay.
At least, come on. If you're gonna do it, at least do it in a more, polished manner.
I know. I mean, if you look at India, you have dozens of religions, right? You have 30 odd states, hundreds of cultures, thousands of languages. I don't know, 4 major castes, and then probably hundreds of varnas and subcastes or whatever you might call it. And then you're supposed to follow all of that, figure out the compatibility according. So I had a colleague who really liked a girl he was seeing. He met through this arranged marriage thing, and in the end, things didn't happen because I don't know. I mean, if I'm saying it right, but when the astrologer compared their charts, they were only compatible on 12 out of the 24 or 34, whatever, qualities they are, which is insane. They both liked each other. And that is all that matters. So that's one. And I think at the same time, the onus of change is on the youth, right? If you look at all of these matrimony ads also, all of these expectations. So this guy, again, gave me a couple of examples. So a couple of girls who approached him, they were very forthright in the first conversation regarding his salary, his earnings, his property. And they were like, I mean, if we're going to marry, we want to be married to someone who is settled in life, financially secure. And that guy asked the lady about the salary. She was earning probably 1/3 of what he was, right? And then the expectation is that the guy has to provide, which is wrong, right? If you're talking about an equal world where men and women should and will have equal rights and equal liabilities and responsibilities, you need to have equal contribution too. So if you're talking about men doing household chores, right, and being more active in parenting, then you have to have women reciprocating by leaving these old notions of financial stability has to come from the male partner and all of these things. And I mean, in probably just a few more years, right, hopefully in just probably next year or the year after that, we might see same-sex marriages legalized, right? So then how does that work? So if your 2 girls are married, who do they depend upon, right? And that thing has to change. And again, from the boys' side, it's the same thing. People, I mean, the boy might be a 5'8", 100 kilos, fat with a pot belly and all, but he wants a girl who looks like a movie star, who has a perfect figure, perfect skin tone, right? So we have all of these shades of racism, of classism, of let's say financial expectations still running amok from both sides. And unless the youth changes, you can't really expect people, the last generation, to adapt, right? They're set in their ways. You can't expect them to change overnight. So you have to take that step, right? Yeah. So I think a lot needs to change, but things will happen, Krish. They'll happen. Things have changed for the better. They'll keep on changing. We'll eventually reach to a point where this will no longer be an issue, and hopefully we reach there soon, but it will change.
hopefully this conversation does me some good on the, personally in a couple of years, maybe. We'll see.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, see, your life is your life, right? So you have to make sure that any decision that affects you has to be yours. I'm sorry, parents are amazing, and I think we've already touched upon this during the earlier part of our conversation. I'm eternally indebted to my parents. But when this, when it was time for my marriage, it was my choice. I had a huge fight with them, and that was by no means disrespecting them or ignoring all that they've done for me. But again, it's my life. They don't have to spend time with my wife. I have to spend time with her, right? And there was this huge issue about me being from, let's say Uttarakhand, her being from Odisha, different languages, different cultures, all of these things. Doesn't really matter. Right. So I think you need to take charge, and it'll be a tough fight at times, but you need to persist because you have to make that change. So when it's your turn, you're 25, you want to get married, go ahead. You want to get married to a particular person, go ahead. You want to go to arranged marriage route, go ahead. You don't want to get married forever, go ahead. Your choice. Right. And I think we need to sort of take up when I say we, I'm already in my 30s, so not we, but young people like you have to take up the mantle and drive that change.
It's absolutely true. Like when I talk with you, I mean, it's the same when I was reading your answers, when I've been reading your answers all these years, you have this incredible amount of clarity that when it comes to a lot of subjects, if it's almost like Master Oogway from Kung Fu Panda when talking to you or when sharing your thoughts on subjects.
I'm not that old, buddy.
That's one thing. I mean, my knowledge on this whole comics or even movies is much more limited. So that's probably the most closest comparison that I could find. Maybe Yoda, and then again, he's much shorter. But anyway, it's like you always seem to be on the right side of things, And by the way, I
That's
don't
going to offend a lot of people.
Politically, I don't mean this.
Yeah.
I know you have a couple of instances where people have come at you for that as well. As in, it's sort. You seem to be very closer to the truth in a lot of subjects than most people. A lot of important subjects. But if you could, are there instances, are there any opinions where you believed something, but then you realized that you were on the wrong side of things?
Absolutely. Yes, I think I told you, right? So I had a very narrow view of things a few years back, right? And it's got to do with your exposure to various facets of human life, to various cultures, various settings, to various points of view. So, for example, I think if you just go back to my school, if I just go back to my school days, I thought that homosexuality was a unnatural thing, right? I mean, the same argument that a lot of people still use, right? It's a man and a woman, and there's no way two men or two women can reproduce. Things have been made that way, and in nature also you see the same thing. You don't see two lions together, you don't see two tigers together, all of that bullshit, right? So I had that view, and again, it never transformed into hatred for someone who is like that, right? Someone who let's say someone who not to a level of personal hatred or vendetta against someone. I can never understand that. But again, I thought, okay, this is something unnatural, right? So if when that argument came along that homosexuality or transgenderism could probably be a medical issue, right? I thought, okay, maybe that's right. It could be something because you anyways do not see that prevalent in nature. In human beings also, probably just 1% of, probably less than that, people are not, let's say, heterosexual or cisgender. Then it has to be something abnormal, right? It's in 0.1% of cases. But then when I started reading about it, one thing was reading about things, right? And then I figured out research that it's far more prevalent in nature than you would believe. It's perfectly fine. I think monogamy or this particular, all of these codified structures are just there in the human race. But animals have a far more liberal, far more inclusive kind of a setup. And obviously there are biological differences. And then again, I don't retain the exact gist of them, but there were a few scientific reports that said that it could be because of your genetic makeup. It could be because of your upbringing also. It is perfectly natural. It's got nothing to do with your, let's say, with having abnormality in that sense. That was one. The second one was I realized that how does it affect me? It doesn't, right? If somebody is out there, if there's a guy out there who likes guys, doesn't really affect me, their choice, right? And that is one of the core philosophies that I follow whenever I have to think about a topic. Does it affect me in a negative way? No. Me getting offended at something because my religion says so is not really affecting me. That is something that I choose to believe in, right? So just because it offends your religious sensibilities or probably just your, it is against your worldview doesn't really mean. So if somebody comes out tomorrow and says that it should be perfectly fine to have something like The Purge, the movie, every once a year, I'll be vocally against it, right? Because that actually affects me. I might get killed, but in this case, it doesn't. People's choices do not affect me. So why should I be bothered? And if I have to, I should respect everyone's choices, right? People can choose to. If you go about, there are 700 crore people in the world, right? And if you believe that everybody should have a particular way of thinking, they should follow a particular political ideology, particular philosophy of life, have a particular approach, follow a standardized, then where's the fun in that, right? So you have to accept that all of these 700 people are unique, right, in their own way. They have, you'll never find two people who are exactly the same. And you have to come to terms with that, and that is the beauty of life. So I think that understanding or that clarity that people's choices are theirs. If they do not affect me, I don't really care what music you listen to, unless you are playing it so loud that I'm able to hear it in my house, and it's disturbing me, for example. I don't really care what you do, right? So, and that's not in a derogatory sense. It's in the sense that I'm not being apathetic, but that is accepting that okay, this guy is into something that I am not, but it's perfectly fine because I am into things that he's not, for example, right? So that understanding that it's not about you, and that people have their own lives, they are free to make their own choices, and you are no one to judge people based on what they believe in or what they do, their actions, their thoughts, their ideologies, is something that I've been, that I've tried to keep at the center of my thought process every time I think about a new issue or something. If I read or talk about something or a new topic or a viewpoint that is diametrically opposite to mine. So in that case, I believe that I think we have to evolve. We can't just stick to outmoded beliefs, and we need to be open-minded. We need to believe in science, and at the same time, we need to keep away from other people's business, right? Mind our own. So, and you have to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So that's the philosophy, the quid pro quo thing, right? So you have to be a good person, and you have to accept all of these changes. So tomorrow, for example, probably just let's say 50 years down the line, if you have realistic androids and a person falls in love with an android, I'm pretty sure that even a lot of let's say homosexual people might oppose it, for example, right? I'm just taking a view, because that is something that is novel, that is new, that has not happened before. You think that is unnatural, but who are you to judge? No one, right? So you have to come to terms with the fact that the world will keep on changing. Things will happen that have never happened before, and just because they've never happened before doesn't make them wrong, right? So we need to be. So if you see in Star Wars, right? So there are all of these species, and there people are no longer restricted by the fact that they have to date within the same species. I don't know the science of how that works, but if that be the case 200 years from now, so be it, right? So people should not judge. People should give a chance, try and understand, be more be more open to new ideas and new thoughts and to changes. And if that is the thing that everybody follows, will be a far more, I think, understanding, far more loving global community. So that is actually, so yeah, I had this. I think this was just an example, right? So this is all got to do with, and you'll still see a lot of. So I had a junior from college who came out when the Supreme Court verdict was announced on homosexuality, and he came out, and that his story was beautiful. It was featured. His parents are amazing. His story was featured on a lot of pages. But when I actually went through the comments on his Facebook post, there was so much hatred, right, from people who didn't even know him. I didn't know him, and I felt amazing that he finally had this opportunity to be who he was. But I saw a lot of comments from people saying this is unnatural, and that his parents should be ashamed that he's turned out this way, which is insane. I mean, these people are just sitting there stewing in their own filth, in their own poison, right? Spewing that out for others, and it's not the nice way to do it. If you don't have something good to say, just shut the fuck up, right? Sorry to use that word again. I think I've used it a couple of times in the discussion, but that is how sometimes it angers me to see people thinking that they are probably the gods and Messiah who has to deliver everyone from evil and show us the light, and their way of thinking is the perfect one, and that couldn't be further from the truth. So if people just mind their, started just minding their own business, that'd be great.
Absolutely. If there is one takeaway from the whole conversation for anyone listening, the problem is a lot of things that we discuss, the things that we want to say to people who do this stuff, they are probably not the ones who will sit and listen to this. Right?
Hopefully.
And these people,
I hope they do, actually, right? I hope they do. I hope people change, right? Change is good. So I hope people change, people shed their old, outdated beliefs, right? Which were fine when you were in the 15th century, when people had slaves and, women had no rights. But then, things have changed. You have to adapt to it. That's the one thing that human beings should do. It's to evolve, right? So I hope they do. I hope they have a change of heart when they listen to this.
Do you see yourself penning a book sometime down the road?
Sometime, yes. Sometime soon. Probably no.
I've been awesome, man. I'll tell from experience. At 4,000 answers, it's getting a little difficult to rummage through a pile of golden nuggets you have.
I had a few ideas. I still have a few ideas. So I keep a journal wherein I've just listed them down. Things I want to do. Things, probably books I want to write. I have been doing that for a long time. But as I told you, I am in a phase right now where I'm not able to focus on something very specific. And writing a book is going to take a massive amount of effort. And I just want to write something that is true to who I am, to write something that I think would help people. Right? It could be a fictional story, right? I had a couple of ideas in mind, but I'm not a very creative person. So those were the only two ideas that I had. I still have. But in terms of non-fiction, I think my aim would not be to, publish and get to a bestseller title from any of these portals or to make a lot of money out of it. It'll just be to help people. So I think I would do that at some point in time. Soon, probably not. I haven't really started. I penned down the first page of one of my 6-7 ideas that I have right now, probably when I was 24, 25. And that is still there on page 1. Wow. So maybe, yes, I think I've taken a break from writing on Quora, right, for some time now. So maybe this will give me time to think about, focus, and put all of my thoughts and energies into this single pursuit. I would love to do that, but I think it'll be a challenge for me because as I said, I don't really have that amount of patience or that amount of focus. But I think it'll be good. It'll be challenging. It'll be good. It'll be rewarding in the end. And it'll be interesting. If nothing, it'll be a very interesting journey, 6-7 months, a year probably. But at some point, absolutely, Krish. Yes.
Wow, that's awesome. I probably pre-book somewhere. Let's state that I pre-book a signed copy. So as we come to the final part of the episode, and this is what I like to call as the random, these very random questions. There is no really any connection between one and the other. Just a few random things that I really want to thoughts on.
Absolutely.
So let's maybe start with, if you could dine with anyone in the world, top CEOs, actors, scientists, who would you want to dine with? You get to pick one person. You get to have one great conversation over a hot meal. Who would that person be?
Interesting. Again, I don't idealize actors or let's say sports people a lot, right? I think they do a wonderful job of what they do. but I don't think they are someone to be emulated or to be, followed. Again, not meaning negative or anything about them, but the amount of adulation or the crazy fan attention that they get overshadows a lot of other stuff, for good actual impactful stuff that other people are doing. But I think there's one person, actually two people, who I would love to talk to. So one of them would be Bill Gates, right? So again, famous for, let's say, all the famous for a lot of different reasons. I think richest man on the planet for so many years, right? Founder of one of the biggest firms in the world, and all of these things. Revolutionized the PC movement. But I think it's the second half of his career, right? After he retired from active participation in Microsoft, is what I would focus on. I think it's amazing that a person like him has time to do all of those things. As someone like him and his wife, Melinda, have been driving a lot of change in the world, right? In Africa, in India, campaigns to eradicate polio, malaria, hunger, access to clean water, sanitation. It's amazing that there's this one guy, a billionaire who could probably just retire and live a luxurious life, but he chooses to spend his retirement actually having an impact on the world because he can do that, right? And it's amazing that he does all of that every day. And I look forward every year to his, section about his favorite books, and I try and pick and read them as much as possible. And I follow him a lot, and I think he's someone to be emulated. If you want to talk about a businessman to be emulated, that probably would be Bill Gates. He built a business from scratch. He revolutionized the entire industry. He built this amazing company that's among the top 5 in the world right now. He's provided access. I think Windows still powers 90-95% of all operating system, computers, right? And it has given people. The internet wouldn't be the same without probably Microsoft. And you can argue that he might not have been the best of person during his early years. His spat with his co-founders, right? The monopoly wala thing and all. But that is something that he did probably in his early years. Right now, he is someone who comes across as a very wise, very learned, very amazing, empathetic human being who's doing everything he can to bring a real change in the world. And his efforts probably has impacted the life of millions of people in Africa and in Southeast Asia. So I think that would be the top of my list. Second would be Salman Khan, and not the Indian actor, the founder of Khan Academy. Right? Yeah. So again, he has done more to revitalize education than anybody else in the last so many years, right? Khan Academy has given rise to online learning, and that is one of my favorite things about the internet. And he did all of that for free. He left his wonderful job and he did all of this, and he comes across again as a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful human being. And one of my favorite TED Talks is, I think TED or TEDx Talks, is when Bill Gates introduced Sal as the founder of Khan Academy and one of his favorite people, and that was a very wonderful moment for me, because these two are two of my favorite people when it comes to someone to look up to. Yeah, these two people will be the top of my list right now.
It's amazing. I'll move on to the next one here. When you turn 80, what is the one thing that you want to be known for?
I don't have that drive, Krish, that I want to be known or something, right? I just
maybe in that case, let me just tweak my question for you there. If you turn 80, when you're probably buried, what would you want your tombstones to say? I know it's not the best way to put something.
Absolutely fine. I think that's. Death is inevitable, right? And it's not something that should not be talked about, right? And it's natural. So I would just say that I would want towards the twilight of my life to personally know that I've had a wonderful life, a happy life. I've done everything that I could. Right, and I think I would just want to be known as a good person, a good husband, a good brother, a good son, a good father. If we actually ever decide to have kids, a good friend, a good person, and I just want people to not remember me, but I just want people to be happy, for having me in their life, how so much ever, right? So it could be someone my closest friend, it could be someone I just talked to once, right? And that is something that actually I try and emulate again, right? So if I meet someone, talk to someone, my core aim is that after that interaction, they just should be happier than they were, right? That they have to have something that they imbibe from that, and they are better off knowing me or having talked to me or having interacted with me than they would have been not doing that. So that's pretty much it, right? If my tombstone had to say something, it probably would say a good person, a good happy person. That's pretty much it.
And I mean, I might probably err on the side of flattery here, but as someone who's been following all these years, like I said at the very beginning, and it is safe to say that you have had a profound amount of impact on a lot of people. I'm sure I'm not the only person there. I'm sure there are like hundreds of people on Quora who feel the same about you.
And so one of my favorite things about the last 7 years of having been active on social media, writing a lot of these things, have been when people come back to me and tell me that I've actually been able to help them, and that's a very amazing feeling. So a lot of folks told me that they were able to ace their MBA entrance exam because of the advice I gave them, and I think that's again overblown. It was all because of their efforts. I just was able to probably guide them in the right direction. A lot of people have told me that they were able to do things, or stop procrastinating, start get up and start doing things and achieve something that they wanted to because of a couple of messages that were exchanged between me and them. And that's probably the best feeling, right? So whenever I get all of these messages and I have to somehow figure out how to save all of them on Quora, right? There's not an easy way. There's no way to search and all. But I think that those are some of my fondest memories from the platform. So I hope so. I think that's amazing, right? And I just hope that I can continue that for the next 50 or 60 years, hopefully.
So I'll move to the last couple of these random tech questions here. So imagine you have a billboard that will be planted in every town in the world, and it will display a message that you want. What would you want the billboard to say? It could be a quote, an adage, a message that you firmly believe in, that you want to put out for millions of people to see.
I think it's some of the oldest things, right? So you have the line in the Bible that says, love thy neighbor, right? And that was written at a time when you actually probably just stayed in one place. Now everybody is your neighbor, right? So you keep on moving, you keep on meeting people. So when you're flying, the person next to you is your neighbor for the duration of the flight. So I'll say love your neighbor, with the caveat that your neighbor now is everyone else in the world, right? So be good to people, be a good person. That's pretty much it. I think if everybody just decided to sort of be a good person and not hate someone because they have a very different political ideology, or they are from a different religion, different ethnicity, I think that would be swell. Yeah. So I think that is all. I think there's nothing new I can add to it. So some of the timeless pieces of wisdom are absolutely wonderful. So yeah, be a good person, love other people. Don't be an asshole. Right?
I like that last line better than love thy neighbor. As a nice new age. Don't be an asshole. A billboard.
Absolutely.
Okay, so for the last question, before we reverse the tables, which is very easy to ask me one question. So the last question for you would be, if you could nominate one person from your network that you have always admired, someone who you have looked up to maybe, and who you think would be who'd make a great guest for the Tech Away Club podcast, someone whose words of wisdom will impact a lot of people, who would that be?
Okay. So see, again, I think I'll probably just stick to people I know on Quora for this, right? Because there'll be someone who's common. So I'll say one, Naman Chakravarti. And again, Naman, if you're hearing this, sorry for putting you in this position. But Naman, I think, is a very balanced, very refined, very clear-headed guy who knows what he's doing and what he's thinking, and I think I would love to meet him someday. So one would be Naman, the other one would be Tejaswita Apte. So she's been writing a lot. I mean, we have been there on Quora since the very start. I mean, Naman came in a few years later, but Tejaswita and I go back to probably 7-8 years from now, like 2013, early 2013, 14. So Tejaswita, and she's been writing a lot. She used to write a lot about law and all, and then I've recently been following her posts on life, on marriage, on love, and all of these things. And I think again, she's a wonderful human being, and she actually was very helpful during a very difficult period that I had a year or so ago, right? And I think and she will bring to the table a perspective which would be very interesting, very unique, and I think that again, both of these people are fantastic. They are knowledgeable, they are very balanced, very sorted individuals, and I absolutely admire both of them. So either of them would be amazing.
Wow, that will be great.
And again, guys, if you're hearing this, sorry. I mean, if you don't want to hear this, I'll apologize to you later.
I'll probably take it on from there.
Sure.
See how they feel about this. I'm sure they'll be happy that you did mention. And I'm not too sure how willing they would be, but we'll figure it out. So, as I personally reluctantly come to close the curtains on this one, we reversed the tables, and I thought of take the hot seat, and I will answer one question that you have for me.
Okay. Yes, I do actually. A couple of them are driven by personal motives. So I actually thought about it, right? And my sister has been pestering me to get into podcast. And I think it's a wonderful use of your downtime. And you've done an amazing job of setting something up from scratch. And I actually was going through your podcast listing on Spotify and all through the episodes and all. I think you've put in a lot of effort and you've built up something which could be very big in the future. I hope so, right? I absolutely pray that it does. One thing, how did you get started, right? So for someone who probably would want to start a podcast later on, what would be your advice in terms of keeping it simple, in terms of figuring out the content or your niche area, in terms of driving and researching about the person and the conversation that you want to have with them, in terms of driving the conversation, in terms of post discussion editing and all, right? So what would be a simplified version of your advice to someone like that?
Okay, so I think this is something that having started, I just started out, but having spoken with a few people here and there, this is something that I do have people asking, and this is again something that I ask. Even earlier today, I was talking with one of my friends, Roshan Kariappa. He runs a podcast called The Startup Operator. So even I still have my doubts, and we set up a call earlier today just to clear up my doubts and some of the things that I have been pondering about. Again, earlier this week, I was talking to someone who wanted to set up a podcast, and the sort of thing that I told him was, I think I'm planning to do a podcast 101, much similar to my personal finance 101 or coronavirus 101. I want to do this podcast 101 where I bring up a fellow podcast host and we'll clear up all things right from the topic research to distribution, everything, one masterclass on that. But that my 2 cents on that would be, if you're looking to start a podcast, figure out what you really like, right? It's probably very obvious, but it's very easy to fall into this trap of what people are doing as opposed to what you personally like. To give a very personal example, since I'm in the SaaS space, the startup ecosystem, I've been very fortunate to have a lot of people who are already doing this, who already have their side hustles as podcasting. I've been very lucky, but almost 99% of the people that I know who are podcasting, they do it within SaaS or startups. When I wanted to do podcasting, it would have been very easy for me to follow the trend, Of course, I already know a lot of people in SaaS. It would have been much easier bringing up guests. But I was very clear that SaaS or startups is just one of my passions. I am interested equally in psychology, in sports, and having these abstract conversations like the one you had. So that was one of the very first things that I sort of had this clarity on, which greatly helped.
Right? I think that advice holds up for everything, right? So you should do things that you can do or you want to do rather than things that everyone else is doing. Right? So yeah, that's good advice. And I actually look forward to that episode, Krish, where you break it down. I would probably want to do this kind of a conversation where I'm on the other side, I'm the host. Sometime later, right? Probably again, a lot of my plans won't come to fruition, but yeah, I think that'll be good. So I look forward to that episode. And I actually have one more on the same topic, similar topic, right? I don't know a lot about your personal life, but I've been reading about the Takeaway Club. So if you had to just pick up one particular moment, let's say a single sentence, a single anecdote, or something that you could summarize probably in a couple of minutes. So what was your favorite moment in doing this for the last few months now, right? So a favorite moment or takeaway from your earlier discussions.
Okay. See, this is not fair because you asked this question. Because whatever I bring up, it does involve you, right? And this would have been my answer. Whoever.
So prior to today.
No, actually, see, this goes back to the time. Do you remember when I actually cold messaged you on LinkedIn? So I sent this huge message. And I sort of had forgotten about it, and you hadn't seen for a couple of weeks. But when you actually saw, you put out a very nice note, right? So I immediately took a screenshot of it and I shared it with one of my very good friends. So that was a really nice moment that I could instantly recall. It could also be a case of recency bias.
Absolutely. No, if you have to go back to an actual episode that you did, and thank you for that compliment, Krish, but if you had to go back to an episode where you were having a discussion with someone else, right, and over the past 12, 13, 14 episodes that you've done, and if you had to just pick a moment.
I'm not really able to pinpoint any particular moment or a question as such, but one of the episodes that I really enjoyed doing was the one with Shashwat Sekhar, currently in the US. And how I got to know him is I was sitting in my house one day and I had this very old, somewhat old newspaper. Right? And I was casually, I don't read newspapers at all. I know it's a bad habit, but I simply can't do that. But somehow there was this piece on one of the supplementary papers that caught my attention. The Virus Fight Club was the title of it. It basically had these small profiles of people who have been doing their part in the fight against the coronavirus. Right? And there were folks from NGO, there was a couple of startups, and that's where I saw Shashwat's profile. This one tiny box, he's at US working on a vaccine. So I sort of took that newspaper and I simply looked him up on LinkedIn. And to my surprise, he was actually very fast in responding to my connect. And from there on, we connected and we ended up doing the episode. This entire thing happened in 10 days. I was amazed at how everything fell in place. For me, someone who never read the newspaper, to actually look at the paper and then to find someone from Chennai who had gone to US and is working on the coronavirus. Like, what are the chances of that? And then me connecting with him and him responding. And he was actually someone who was into podcasts, so he was more than happy to do that. So that was probably one of my favorite moments. And the episode itself, that became the most downloaded episode because he would have broken down everything you needed to know about the virus, right?
Wonderful. I'll check that out, definitely.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Krish.
And yeah, so I'm sort of disappointed that this whole conversation is coming to an end, but I'm very glad that I got to record so that we can revisit whenever we want, right? Long-term plans. I'm going to have this content repository on everything. I'll have different categories, right? Wisdom, startups, everything. Have different guests, and whenever I wanna I feel like I need a bit of clarity on things. I'm just gonna go back to this wisdom folder and pick up this episode with Deepak Mehta.
That's wonderful, Krish, and thank you so much for this opportunity. Right, it's something that is out of my comfort zone, and I'm glad I did it with someone who's as accommodating and understanding as you, and you've been very patient with me. So thank you for that. And this was a very wonderful experience for me, and a Sunday well spent. So my compliments to you for the job that you're doing, and my gratitude to you for thinking, and having me on this on your show. And best of luck for the podcast too.